SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more. Go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your.
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live in the 702 on a President's Day edition of the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, those are the platforms. And, of course, many audio podcasts that you can find your podcast. We're live all around. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell button, get all latest notifications. Don't miss out. We're on a full show slate today. I am excited about all the interviews we've got coming up. Dan Holmi of the Locked On Capitals is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking a little more on the NHL playoffs. Plus to the Washington Capitals, just the state of the team itself. And it is really interesting. We are getting geared up for that time of year where the NHL playoffs, they're going to be coming around the corner. 26 games left in the regular season, and then we're underway. We had a really great guest yesterday. Tony Cordasco came aboard, Locked On BGK. You can check him out from there. Really, really good stuff. I love this time of year. Hockey gets intensified. The NBA, you know kind of how a lot of this stuff works with them. NBA playoffs is going to be coming up around the corner. And then, we get into the NBA playoffs. And we have so much other stuff going on. XFL was a success this past weekend. And so we're still keeping it rolling here on this President's Day weekend. So I do want to start with this. So here's where, like I've said this over and over and over again, because this is what it's all about. When we're in that position, coming close to closing a season. So the other thing I do want to talk about is MLB season is right around the corner. So the NFL is done. That chapter's closed. XFL's going on. NHL and the NBA season, they're still rolling until we get to the playoffs, which is normally right there close to the summertime. But baseball season is what starts around the corner. There is a lot of stories, and we always say this every year when it comes to Major League Baseball. There are so many stories. This year's story is because they want to be in the same category as like the NFL, as like the NBA. Here's the difference. Their ratings are nowhere close to the NFL, not even close to the NBA. Yes, there are certain dramas, there are certain things that go on in baseball, but the tradition has always been kept the same. It is, in fact, one of those scenarios and situations that ideally, when you look at the MLB season, now here's the great thing this year. I think ratings would be really, really good. This would be great because we have the World Baseball Classic right around the corner, and who is all represented in it? So unfortunately, we had news Clayton Kershaw has withdrawn out of the WBC, but he was frustrated. Personal reasons, could not explain why, and I get it. And then you have Mike Trout, you've got Pete Alonso, you've got Mookie Betts, you have a lot of really talented superstars in Team USA, plus you have a lot of talented players internationally. That's what this game is all about. There's international play everywhere. I mean, we watch Shohei Ohtani be the unicorn that he is. He's representing for Team Japan. Plus, Miguel Cabrera, this will be his 5th time ever in his career And I think this might be his last one, because he's getting up in age, that he's played with Venezuela and has hit a home run in all 4 of his trips. Could he possibly hit a home run in his 5th trip to the World Baseball Classic? There's so many stories. But Puerto Rico's got a solid team. Dominican Republic's got a really solid team. So the ratings, and if you watch the World Cup just this past year, I thought the ratings were great. The only thing that really kind of took a lot of people by surprise and a little more of the determining factor was because there was a lot of flops. I don't know if any of you caught on to that in the World Cup, but I was a little frustrated because of how many flops there really was in soccer. I mean, look, the NBA, it's flops galore. Everybody could take advantage of it. But when it comes into the World Cup, which is every 4 years, I don't want to expect to see that. Like, there are calls that are meant to be called, and then there's some refs are going to swallow the whistle. You have to battle through adversity. But a lot of the players, they know that. They know that representing for their respective country. And so why are we implementing more flops? I never understood it. So the World Baseball Classic is going to be something special. Team USA, they're reigning champs. So depending on who wants it more, but you get a chance to see a lot of superstars. And this year they're all over. So they'll be in Arizona. They'll be also in it's so much fun. And when you see an atmosphere like this, it's unlike any other atmosphere we've ever come across in baseball. But besides that, the fact of the matter is that baseball has become that very high salary league. There's no salary cap like the NFL, like the NBA, which I kept kind of preaching I wish that they would, because look at all the bottom tier teams. I looked at every single one of their payrolls. By the way, the A's have mentioned they may be focusing their move into Las Vegas. I still think it's a great idea. Most people may say otherwise, but I've said this over and over again. The Oakland mayor, everybody in California, you all know what the harsh truth and the reality is about where the A's, what their state is, and are they really generating a lot of revenue? No, they are not. Outside of Alameda and outside of a bunch of places in Oakland, there is no generated economy. So why go through all that stress and headache? I know people are jealous because of the fact that Las Vegas has become the sports town now. They're on the market. You remember back in the 1970s, maybe even early on before, when Oakland finally hit the map? They won 3 championships back to back to back. That's how it was. And if you watch the documentary with the A's of the 3-peat year, it was hard dealing with Charlie Finley. It was hard dealing with an owner like that. Players were standing up against him, and they were defending each and every single one of their teammates in the locker room. Like, it was tough. It's a great documentary, but it's very hard to end up 3-peating in this league. So, but besides all of that, you look at every single one of the team's payrolls. It doesn't come close to everybody else's, like the Dodgers, like the Yankees, like the Braves, like the Astros, like the Cubs. Some would say the Red Sox, but man, Boston is going to be in for a toll for themselves. They're not going to look the same. They've now got to start implementing more draft picks. They now got to start reloading. They got to start getting best players that they possibly can. But I think a lot of that has to come from their front office and their general managing. It always does. When you watch what general managing does, when you watch exactly what happens behind closed doors with a lot of these teams, you could tell what side of the ship are they on. So this narrative this year is they are implementing a lot more rule changes. So they have now agreed where they're going to make it as a permanent rule, We're in the regular season, not the postseason, the regular season. So slow down, folks. I like this idea. So you'll have a runner at second base in extra innings because what has been the problem? They have extended a lot of extra inning play. Nobody wants to sit there for at least 18 plus innings and still have to determine a winner. Players get tired. The fans themselves got working the next day, especially on a weekday. Like, that's where I think it's going to really benefit, and it'll help in the long run. So I like the rule. I like the rule more specifically for the regular season because in the postseason, I don't care. You got to really be tougher in the playoffs. That is what it's all about. We just watched the NFL playoffs. It got tough. It got exciting. Ratings were through the roof. I can only imagine what the NBA and the NHL playoffs are going to look like in the coming months. But Major League Baseball, I mean, you had several stories. The Padres, the Phillies, you had the Guardians, you had the Mariners. You had so many teams that got in here this year. And they're already projecting it might be the same teams that make it into the postseason this year. I don't know about that because baseball's always got unwritten stories with other teams that they don't even pay attention to. So it's a possibility. But I like the run rule. I think it works for the regular season because you've got to wrap up games, and so everybody can get to work on the next day. So I like it. I don't like it for postseason because postseason's meant to be pressurized, but regular season I can deal with. Plus, two, everybody's going to be dealing with the pitch clock, which has been, I don't know why it's been such a big topic, but the pitch clock is now going to be very, very strict. And there's going to be so many other rule changes. So that's what the narrative is going to be about. It's about the adjustment period. And that's what the baseball, committee, that's what the league itself is now starting to shift towards because we watched the NFL. I mean, hell, we just watched the XFL this weekend. And I thought their officiating and a lot of their crews did an A++ job. They covered every single angle. They were all over the field. And I thought it was great, too, when they came back with replays. Baseball's got replays, too. But sometimes the umpires, they got to make the right calls. I know a lot of people get flustered when it comes to umpires not making the right calls. I know that feeling, and I know what that looks like. So, to me, I like it. I am not in any opposing stance to this, but I will say payroll needs an awful lot of adjustment. You're paying players almost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars just to play a single position. Payroll's got to be better with a lot of other teams. A's, they're no longer competitive. The Diamondbacks, please, they're a snoozer in Arizona. They're just as worse as, honestly, they're not even as worse. They're probably better than the Arizona Coyotes right now, which the Coyotes don't even have an arena. They are sharing an arena with the local college, Arizona State. So understand something when it comes to these payrolls. Because baseball, we know it's a no salary cap league. Well, these players are getting paid, and it's just dropping like flies. So, I just think that the narrative on this with baseball, there's a lot of rule changes. There's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. I think it'll be exciting and interesting to watch the World Baseball Classic because I'm all in on it. I'm rooting for, Mexico, USA. So I think that there's definitely some really, really good competition. Dominican Republic's reloading. Venezuela, they are stacked. So is Puerto Rico. So I'm excited for what the World Baseball Classic is. It's just that time of year every year you watch it, and I think it's fantastic. But that's what I think the narrative will be. All right, let me shift over to hockey for a second because we had two really good moves. And just right around the corner, Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals will be joining me here in just about a few minutes. So I do want to discuss two moves because the trade deadline is coming up quick, and we've already had three big moves. We had Bo Horvat that went to the New York Islanders. I'll have Gil Martin in the second hour I'm going to be talking to him about that because I do like and I am interested in seeing what the Islanders are going to look like. I thought they found their perfect fit as far as a forward that they have been looking for since they lost Jordan Eberle. But so we had Bo Horvat who went to New York. And then we also got, over that weekend, Vladimir Tarasenko to the New York Rangers. I'm in complete awe of that. I think it looks great. I think the Rangers have honestly become that offensive, like that dangerous offensive team. You watch Colorado, you watch Tampa Bay, you watch a lot of these offensive-centric teams. And I think bringing in Vladimir Tarasenko, who was an absolute big fish next to Ryan O'Reilly in St. Louis, and St. Louis is getting an overhaul of picks. So they're at the position now that they're clearly rebuilding. They're not in any way, shape, or form where they may end up potentially shooting for the playoffs because the team's just been kind of inconsistent. They paid Torrey Krug a big amount of money. They paid a lot of guys big amount of money, and now you've got to get first, second-round draft picks. You've got to be willing to reload. This is the stuff I preached about the Vegas Golden Knights yesterday. Because if you don't have draft capital, you're screwed. That's what teams are going to be expecting. And believe me, there's a lot of teams that are already in the works of one of the number one draft picks right now. So I watched, what the Blues are, and they're not close to what the 2019 team looked like. Jordan Binnington was off to a great start, and then all of a sudden, you're starting to hear some anger issues. You're starting to hear a lot about just inconsistency with offense, defense, so many different positions with St. Louis. And that's where they're like, we got to make trades. We got to start reloading. So Tarasenko to the Rangers, I think, is great because he's right there next to Chris Kreider. You've got Mika Zibanejad, Adam Fox, young kids that are in this roster. And Gerard Gallant, who's an offensive-centric coach, very hyper-aggressive too. This is where the Rangers really will work this well, even going into the playoffs, because they made it to the Eastern Conference last year. And they made it with that same fuel and that same momentum. So I think Tarasenko on this roster and in this line really, really works. And Igor Shesterkin is exactly their goaltender. I think it works great. But, and I just think Tarasenko, he was worth the risk. And he's fitting in very, very well with New York, especially when you've got a lot of young kids, even Artemi Panarin. We know he's having a really good year. So this is why this is the Rangers' momentum, and this is their year to really, really push forward. So, and then there was one recently that I thought was very interesting that only you can hope they get over the hump. And that was the Toronto Maple Leafs getting Ryan O'Reilly. So Ryan O'Reilly, I think, is a really good player. Very, very good. Somebody that really does know how to distribute the puck, but he also brings a lot of really good leadership. We've watched that in St. Louis several times. And I think that Toronto, they needed juice because they have their young core established when it comes to Austin Matthews and William Nylander and Mitch Marner. They've got several. I mean, here's the other part, too, that kind of hurts them. Because at one point they had Zach Hyman. Then they trade him to Edmonton. They don't have another one of their young scorers that could really bring this team over the top. What happened last year? They were in a toe-to-toe battle. Toronto was knocked out of the first round. They have had so many first-round woes that it drives Leafs fans nuts that they can't even get past that round. They couldn't get past it against Boston. Even the year before, they couldn't get past it against Montreal. Like it never crossed my mind with it. But also, too, when I watched Montreal gets slow. They were a slow team. But yet somehow, some way, they built a lot of momentum. And they were able to beat Toronto in their place. They got them out of the first round. And then Montreal was just playing this hot hand, getting all the way to the Stanley Cup playoffs, all the way to the Stanley Cup final, and then lost to Tampa. But I'm just telling you, they added a really good piece. But my only concern with Toronto is that going to be the piece that gets you past the first round and at the very least shows you to be a threat in the NHL playoffs? I don't know. We talk a lot of like histories. Like I'll make a perfect example about Toronto. Toronto's almost like what the Chicago Cubs were. They were a great team years ago, just before you and I even existed. Like, I was just an amoeba. And they were a great team. And the Cubs, they were fun to watch, no matter how good or terrible that the Cubs were. But then once they established everything from 15 to 16, they finally won a World Series in 16, and they broke the curse. That's what I feel like the Toronto Maple Leafs really have shifted into, is that they are the Chicago Cubs of the NHL. Because they're a team that couldn't get past that next round of the playoffs. And they were just dreadful. But they were a fun watch. I mean, I love Austin Matthews. I still have concerns about Mitch Marner. And I think as far as Sheldon Keefe goes, as far as his head coaching method, I mean, Toronto, they put together good pieces. But I think it all comes down to their momentum shift. If they are not prepared, which I've always said, January, February, and March, you have to find your identity. If you don't find it from then, you're going to be knocked out of the playoffs and you're going to be tossed around. That is the reality. That is how this works. So I am in for Toronto to really make it past that first round. Hopefully they can, but if they don't, I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, this has been kind of the excruciating battle that Leafs fans have been dreading for years. They couldn't get past it. So, again, I'm all in. I'm in on this. So I think this is a really good fit for Toronto. I think Ryan O'Reilly really does display a lot of great leadership. And I think this is exactly what the Leafs needed. But, I mean, you're talking about young kids that are right here on this roster. And they've got a pretty decent goaltending. So I think this will work. I think this will help to get them over the top into that next round of the playoffs. But only time will tell from there. So, good stuff. We are so stacked. So altogether, we've got like 4 interviews. So we got one that's going to be coming up in a few minutes, Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals. Then we've got 2 that are in between in hour 2. And then hour 3, we got one, Locked On Wild, that's going to be with us as well. So we're stacked here on this President's Day weekend. Love it. Absolutely love it. All right, folks. Well, here's the deal. Even though being on President's Day weekend, there's lots and lots of great stuff that I could tell you right now. So this President's Day weekend, I mean, you guys, you and I that are big-time sports fans, even so too, live concerts, live events, stand-up comedies. I do love stand-up comedies. I do like really good ones, but I also do like arts as well. If you are trying to find your seat at the best price on the market, look up SeatGeek. SeatGeek's got you covered with finding your seat at the best affordable price. And of course, easy for both ways. You can be able to get printouts. You can be able to get automatic ticket transfers online, electronically, all for the best price. It's 100% guaranteed as well. And here's the other best part. When you go online to SeatGeek and when you find your seat before checkout, use the promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off of your first purchase. I mean, that's a hell of a deal. I know I've got concerts coming up around the corner, somewhere up in the summertime, and you know I'm going to be using the promo code. So go online to SeatGeek. They have got you covered on all of your sporting events, live concerts, stand-ups, and so much more. With SeatGeek.com, promo code SNAKESPORTS. That's SeatGeek.com, promo code SNAKESPORTS.
I'm on top.
Yo, no, I ain't the type to give up. If I do something, man, I do it till I get what I want. I turn a business out of nothing into something I love. I got a poker face, but honestly, I'm not one to bluff. I flip a switch, never miss, man, I always stay up. Don't let them see you, bitch, always have a plan to stay tough. This life ahead of you ain't easy, it was built to be rough. But that's what makes a personality, is tragedy, bruh. So keep your head on your shoulders. Now we ain't out here moving rocks, we out here moving.
SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more. Go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your first purchase.
Oh yeah, we are up and at 'em on a President's Day weekend. Jake the Snake Silva joining you on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Whew. Like I said, I really do like a lot of these NHL moves. We've already had 3 big fishes caught out of the sea in just before the NHL trade deadline. So I am curious as to what the rest of the season's going to look like. I think we have a great idea as far as the NHL playoffs are going to look like. So there's lots of magic momentum. Like I talked with Tony Gordasco yesterday with the Vegas Golden Knights. They're on a 5-game streak tear. They've been looking pretty good. There's still concerns as far as their identity, but I think they're looking really, really well. So joining me, covering a lot about the Washington Capitals and, of course, seeing how the season's been playing out with them, joining me live via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard, Dan Holmi. So, man, this season, and I've been talking about it a lot, is that we've seen so many shifts of players going everywhere in the NHL. Now, I know the hardest part all NHL fans are talking about is because it's so cap stretched. Like right now, like you're watching the Avalanche, you're watching a lot of these teams. So as we're getting geared up for the trade deadline, because 3 big names have already been moved, and I like 2 of the 3 because I think Bo Horvat is exactly what the Islanders needed because they lost Jordan Eberle to the expansion draft. So they found the replacement. Vladimir Tarasenko, I think, is going to be on fire for the Rangers. And then you've got Ryan O'Reilly with Toronto. Is that the one piece that's going to get him past the first round of the playoffs? I don't know. So from your perspective, seeing this, is there something that the Washington Capitals, because we know they've been in the playoffs for a long time, is there something they're kind of catching their eyes on before they get into the trade deadline?
Well, listen, first of all, thanks for having me on your show here. But I ultimately believe, and this last season was this last week, rather, a good litmus test for this team to ultimately see what they had in the tank. Mm-hmm. It's my belief that they are going to be sellers at the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. This team has just struggled here as of late, and you're getting almost too late into the season to make a push at it. If we take a look at the Metro division here alone, the Capitals sit in 6th place with 62 points, the Hurricanes with 82. So, unless the Islanders or the Pens go on a losing streak and the Caps catch fire, it's my belief that the Caps will ultimately be sellers this trade deadline. This is the first year in quite some time that they've missed the playoffs. So I do think that you are going to see some bigger changes in the offseason. I don't think you're going to see a tear it down to the studs rebuilt. There's been certain promises that were made to Alex Ovechkin that he would be on a competitive team until he retires. So I don't see any huge moves. If you want to take a look here recently, they re-signed Sonny Milano and Dylan Strome. Mm-hmm. Earlier in the season, they also signed Nicholas Aube-Kubel. So I think that if ultimately what they're going to do is make smaller moves, something like that, and maybe stockpile some draft picks for the future.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, looking at a lot of these youngsters, because I think that's what Washington's been trending towards. They were trying to get, younger in some positions. I also do think it's really good, too, for certain teams to add depth, because you just don't know who else is going to be hitting the market once the off season comes around the corner. And so that's where Washington, and they're in a position to where they're outside looking in between the Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So it is kind of tough. And I mean, I can kind of see where Washington, that's a little bit of like, all right, being sellers, you're wanting to keep it to where Ovechkin, he's getting his promise to where it's still being a competitive team. but you're also trying to get a guaranteed deal to where, do we get, draft compensation? Do we get maybe some, money in the cap and maybe somewhere where we can spend it in the offseason, get a real good name? So looking at that, because I know I've always said this, I think Washington and Pittsburgh, they almost kind of have a little mirror reflect because they both have superstars in those respective franchises, but they've always been like those big names you just can't count out. So, seeing that, I've watched this core with, Nicholas Backstrom, John Carlson, and a lot of it. Who do you see on this roster that is very, very likely he may not be in a Caps uniform come this trade deadline or maybe even in the offseason?
Are you talking about someone that's probably going to get moved on from?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I ultimately think that it's going to be Lars Eller. This is the last season of his contract. And ultimately, I think the Capitals have in Hershey, their AHL affiliate, the needed depth that they want to go. Connor McMichael, for example, has been looking for his opportunity. Another player that has not really lived up to his potential is Anthony Mantha. They got in that trade a couple of years ago with Jake Brana. Ultimately a very hot and cold player. And, Caps Nation, a lot of them want to move on from him just because he's an inconsistent goal scorer. The problem is that he has 1 year left on his deal. But so maybe if they could bundle him together with like an Eller just to kind of ship him off, just to get his contract off the books. The biggest changes I think you will see on the Capitals is on the blue line. John Carlson is the only Caps blue liner under contract after this season. So some interesting questions there. There's been contract talks with Dmitry Orlov, but ultimately they're kind of stuck a little bit on a term and how long he's going to be on this team. But I think you're going to see big changes on the blue line in particular. We can't bring it all back here. So big changes are afoot. It's just maybe not the changes that everyone's looking for, especially when you see Tarasenko and Besser and Bo Horvat and all these other names, Timo Meier and all these names. I don't think that ultimately any of those are going to come to the Capitals, and a couple of those have already been spoken for.
Yeah, and it is tough, and I agree with you there because the fact of there's only so much of the long-term players that you could keep on for a while. And then after that bit, like they did, signing Sonny Milano, and they ended up, re-signing, Dylan Strome. These guys are going to be, your potential futures where you got to start thinking younger. You got to start getting some young guys in because I know Ovechkin is going to retire Capital. I mean, there is no doubt about that. But eventually you're going to start to think about, well, after Ovechkin, who we have, and that's where I think it's a great mindset for the Capitals to really bring some new bloods in. I'd be curious to kind of seeing your opinion because I know I watched this team. They've gone through goaltenders. I mean, they went through Braden Holtby, which they won the cup that year. And then they had mixtures of other goaltenders. What have you been seeing from the goaltending this year with Washington? And are there some rooms for improvement in that position?
Well, listen, they went out and they solidified that position. As we know, last year, Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek were inconsistent. That's a safe way to summarize their play. So what Brian McClellan did is he went out and signed the biggest free agent name on the market, Darcy Kemper, Stanley Cup winner Darcy Kemper. And then he wasn't done there. Some people said, well, they'll give a qualifying offer to Samsonov because he was drafted rather high. No, Brian McClellan cut bait with all of them, sent him out. He signed Charlie Lindgren, who didn't have a tremendous amount of NHL experience, a brief stint with the Blues. And then he was also with their AHL affiliate, but he has come here and killed it as well. He ultimately saved the Cap season, or at that moment, the Cap season. When Darcy Kemper was out in the month of December, Charlie Lindgren came in as your backup netminder and really saved the Caps butt in a lot of ways. So the Caps are in a great position netminding wise. And oftentimes people say, well, the Caps are losing because of the netminding. Well, I don't want to say that it's, I'm not absolving them from any guilt, but what I'm saying is it's the defense and the systems in front of them that are failing that's putting Darcy and Charlie under tremendous pressure.
Yeah, and that's where, and I know this too. I mean, talking with the Vegas Golden Knights, I mean, they were very notorious for it because of the fact that they had a really good goalie tandem. But every time when it comes to the defense, if they're not executing their assignments, they're not going and they're providing more protection for the goaltenders because the goaltenders could do so much until they wear and tear. And then they're just like, look, I need help here. Like I need some superior defense, and even to generate the offense to get them to be hyper aggressive on the other side of the net. That is where a lot of those assignments they have to execute. I do want to ask you, because I've seen the shift of this league now, and it's almost as if, and I've said this too, like even in the NFL, we watched this past season, and it's almost as if you kind of have to have a backup quarterback because you just don't know what's going to happen with your starting quarterback. So when I look at this with goaltenders, even with Darcy Kemper, I think he's having a real good season, and then having the backup who really helps them win games when they really, really need it. How important is that even around the league to have just that? Like, I'm not looking for somebody to be, a Darcy Kemper or even a Vasilevsky or somebody in the backup role, but how important is that even through the long stretches of the season?
I mean, it's very important. It's what keeps your team competitive. I'll speak to the Capitals in particular. They struggled last season because of inconsistent goaltending. Listen, they tried to retread that tire for 2 years with Samsonov and Vanacek, and it just didn't work. Vanacek, who we lost briefly in the expansion draft to the Kraken, and then through some movements with sending Dylan to the Jets, they were able to get Vanacek back, and everyone is very happy about it. But ultimately, he did not gel with this team. The interesting thing for me is that many of these Capitals goalies, they go on to other teams and kill it. Look at Vanacek in New Jersey. Look at Phoenix Copley for the Kings. An interesting guy who ultimately never found his spot on a regular basis for the Capitals, was revered as pretty much an AHL goalie, and then has gone out to the Kings and killed it out there. Hats off to Phoenix Copley. A guy that struggled with his team for years to find a spot. And like you spoke of, it was Braden Holtby. And there was always just, the Capitals always have such a depth at the goalie position that it was hard for him to find a spot on there. But to your point, I mean, just take a look at what Copley's doing with the Kings out there. I don't think that it was ultimately ever in the script for him to take on such a load playing with the Kings there. But, based on injury and inconsistent play, that's why you see him thrust into action. Being that you are a Vegas-based show here, I do believe, the Golden Knights, they've struggled, previous seasons with different goalies. Marc-Andre Fleury, who has showed flashes of greatness. But to your point, goalies are integral to a team, of course, but they're only as good as the defenseman in front of them. You can have the greatest goalie in the world, and if the defense is poor, they're going to suffer. One other point for the Capitals, Braden Holtby, one heck of a goalie. Between him and Grubauer, they won the Stanley Cup for the Capitals. Holtby went out to Vancouver. Guess what? Played horribly because there was a horrible defense in front of him. Subsequently, then he went to Dallas and killed it. So, a goalie is only as good as the defense in front of him, but it can be a game changer. And I think for a lot of teams that are kind of on the cusp of making the playoffs this season, see big movement with goaltenders as we head towards March 3rd.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct about that, because I have always preached that about it, because if you're not there with a solid defense up in front of you, that is where it becomes a complete momentum change. And you're just now at that point where you're in your own head. You can't even make the big stops that a lot of like your teammates, even the franchise, is expecting you to. But you still got to, I mean, everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes, but you've got to be able to correct those mistakes for the right reason. So I've always said this, and man, I always love it this time of year when the NHL playoffs come around the corner. But I've always stated this, is that January, February, and March, you've got to be willing to find that identity and establish it. I think there's a bunch of teams, like I could give you an example. Dallas Stars, they're defensive minded. That's their identity. They look really good defensively, but Jason Robertson's making a tear right now with the Stars. And then I watch, Colorado, hyper aggressive offense. That's their identity. So when you are on the outside looking in and the rest of this league, are there some teams that stand out to you that kind of have that identity set, and maybe some they may end up struggling in the playoffs because they can't seem to find their identity late in this season?
Well, I think that, based on this last Stadium Series game that the Capitals got demolished in, I do think that the Hurricanes are going to be a team to be reckoned with. They are number one in the Metro. And, under Rod Brindamore's tutelage there, I think that he's really got that team dialed in. And I think that's the team to beat. I know that there's teams in the Metro that are trying to make a push. You see the moves that the Rangers are making, primarily Tarasenko. You look at the Islanders that were underneath the Capitals. They pick up Bo Horvat, and look at what that's done to them. That's even bumped them on top of the Capitals. So, some of these teams that are on the fringe, it's going to be these small moves here and there that's going to bolster them to the top. But for me, speaking to the Metro in particular, I mean, if you want to even widen the lens a little bit, take a look at Boston. Mm-hmm. Boston's one heck of a team. You take a look at the Hurricanes, pit those two teams together. Wow, sign me up. I want to watch all kinds of that. But it is going to be interesting going forward to see what shakes out. You're starting to see some teams kind of jostle up and down a little bit. In the Metro, though, it's pretty locked in. It's the Canes, it's the Devils, it's the Rangers. And, pretty much those guys, you take a look at the Rangers and you take a look at the Islanders, they put their guns on the table and they looked at everyone else in the Metro and said, what are you going to do about it? So what are you going to do about it? And ultimately the Capitals, I'll speak to them. Even if you brought a big marquee name in, I don't think, say Tarasenko came here, say Bo Horvat came here, say they both came here before they got moved. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that would have made a difference. It's just the total package of this Capitals team that is struggling. You take a look at it, Wilson and Backstrom. Wilson, who has missed almost the entire season, was in the top 3 in goals this last season. He's missed almost primarily this entire season. Kuznetsov has been inconsistent, and Ovechkin has missed some time here due to the passing of his father. So there are a lot of moving pieces that contribute to the Capitals' success and failures, and as a whole, the NHL, their wins and losses and how they're going to fare. But I think that this trade deadline, March 3rd, is going to be most interesting. I see big names getting moved on contenders. Teams like the Caps probably going to be a little quiet.
Yeah, I really would be curious to see which ones that they're really going to start, going all in. Because, I mean, you watch teams where they even made moves in the offseason, like how I watch the Hurricanes. They are clearly all in the Metropolitan. And then the Rangers, in the perfect time, they get Vladimir Tarasenko. They now are starting to become that hyper-aggressive team. And with Gerard Gallant at the helm, I mean, offensive-centric guy. He knows all about it. And so, yeah, and even with the mixtures, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, I've really been curious as far as Florida and even for Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo, I'm very happy of the fact that they've got something they can live for. I mean, Tage Thompson, the kid's unbelievable. And I'm like, and I've watched this shift to where they had Jack Eichel. They had all these guys. And then it's like, now what do they do from there? And Tage is there. He's their big prospect, and he's just looking absolutely phenomenal. So for the Capitals, I mean, I know it's a long, long history with Alex Ovechkin, and I know taking time off to being with his family, I respect that, and that's exactly what you would want for a great player who's won a Stanley Cup, who's obviously broken records. We just seen him not too long ago move up the ranks with, the goal scoring leaders. Will we at some point, and I mean, that guy could honestly play forever. I mean, when I look at Russian players, it's like they got no stop button. Like they could just play for a long, long time. Will we eventually see Alex Ovechkin really make that mark to surpassing the great Wayne Gretzky at goal scores?
I think we will, and I'll answer this question here, and then I got to run because I got a show lined up here. But right now, Ovechkin has 812 career goals. His projected season when he's supposed to pass and surpass Wayne Gretzky is the 24-25 season, 83 goals until he reaches his target. I do think that it is possible for him to catch Wayne Gretzky. He caught Gordie Howe, and he caught all these other guys. The biggest thing for Ovechkin is staying healthy. He's got to stay healthy. And, he is the Russian machine that never breaks, but we are seeing some injuries pop up a little bit the older he gets here, but he is pretty resilient. In past seasons, we found that he's played with, a separated shoulder and some pretty major injuries. So he is a tough guy. He can play through a lot. The big thing for Ovechkin is staying healthy, and I ultimately do think he is going to catch Wayne Gretzky. There's no doubt about it.
Oh man, I would love to see that in the game where I'm gonna get my popcorn ready, watching just greatness behind us. I mean, hey, we watched LeBron James be the all-time scoring leader, passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So to see Alex Ovechkin do it against a great Wayne Gretzky would be just absolutely phenomenal. One in the record books. Well, I appreciate your time here, Dan. Where can people find you to get everything Washington Capitals?
All right, you can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And then, of course, the podcast Locked On Capitals is available wherever you find your podcasts, including YouTube.
Well said from there. Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate your time, and good luck to you and the Capitals. And we shall see what the trade deadline will really be, because it's going to be some hot stuff getting geared up for the NHL playoffs. Thanks, man. Take care of yourself and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Great stuff. And you know, it is really, really awesome. Like, just to see, because Alex Ovechkin is obviously going to be a Hall of Famer. There is no question, no doubt about it. I think it'll be one written in history where, like, again, we watched LeBron James surpass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's now the all-time scoring king. I loved it. I also do think that, you know, a lot of these records, because even in Major League Baseball, nobody is going to break the way that the league is shifting. Nobody is going to break Joe DiMaggio's great record of 56 straight games at all. Nobody, not anybody in this league. And then the hits total leader, Pete Rose. I have been saying this several times. Can we get Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame already? Like, I know back then with the gambling scenario and that situation, I know it was a bad look for, you know, the Cincinnati Reds and even for, you know, Pete Rose, but it doesn't change the fact that the guy has been Charlie Hustle for years. The guy has had that many total bases, that many total hits, and he's not a Hall of Famer. Like, and they kept him away and away. And you notice the trend where they've been inviting him to a lot of different events, especially being an analyst for Major League Baseball and a lot of these different places. Can that please just open the door to talk about this again? Because we're not letting Barry Bonds into the Hall of Fame for whatever reason. Like, we're not even considering it. Look, I understand with Rafael Palmeiro, and I understand with even at Sammy Sosa and a bunch of other players, but still, most home runs, like, I could go for that. Most hits ever by a player, sign me up. Let me watch LeBron James surpass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's now the scoring king, okay? And he's probably got 2-3 years left of his playing career. He wants to play with his son, Bronny. So I'm watching Alex Ovechkin right now and doing what he does best, being a hyper-aggressive scorer, being that guy that's going to honestly take it to the next level. I will be there at the time, sitting up on my couch, feet propped up on the ottoman, popcorn is ready, and I'm just going to enjoy watching that show. Because I think Alex Ovechkin, he is clearly a first-round ballot Hall of Famer. Especially, too, when you're coming into a draft pick, when you had him and Sidney Crosby, both great players, that's going to be exciting for sure. But yeah, he's right about that with the trade deadline and the fact that they're big names that are being changed, that are honestly on the move, and it really does shift the team's momentum. But it depends on how they really work the deals. So I think that the Capitals, I thought too that they also are sellers. Because I think that the team, they have to literally find, they got to find consistency. They don't appear to have it. It doesn't seem to be working best for them. But I think Darcy Kemper really does fit the bill for their goaltending situation. But the blue line and the defense, I mean, outside of John Carlson, they have not found consistency there. So I feel like even if you're giving up some offensive players, re-signing Dylan Strome and re-signing Sonny Milano really does help to keep depth and to keep a balance in their offense. But I think they really have to consider moving away, maybe some offensive pieces, maybe getting somebody from the outside coming in to really shape up this team. So I'm going to take a break here, but we'll be back with more of the Snake Sports Talk Show.
SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more. Go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your first purchase.
That's right. $20 off of your first purchase when you go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports, $20 off. Sporting events, live concerts, stand-up shows, and so much more with SeatGeek.com. Don't lose your seat. Promo code Snake Sports. So I really have been thinking about this too. And I'm looking at a lot of teams that are there in the NHL. And a lot of them, like I've always done a segment on the show, trending up and trending down. So we're getting geared up for the NHL trade deadline. And we've got two great interviews that are going to be coming up here next in hour number 2. But I figured, doing a little bit of some, trade ups and trade downs. So I think this is going to be really, really fun. But here's what I think with as far as some teams. I'll start with the Western Conference. And because I really do think that there are some teams that we already kind of know what their identity is. So trending up. So here we go. Jake's trend up and trend down. Here we go. So here's where we'll start with from here. So let's start in the Pacific Division. So right now you've got the Vegas Golden Knights. So they're already on a 5-game win streak. I think they are definitely trending upward. Here's what my main concern is with the Vegas Golden Knights is that what is their identity? I have not seen it now for the last couple of months. And listen, their identity should never be, well, Mark Stone's just a really good aggressive scorer. That is not an identity. That is not an identity. And I think that the Golden Knights, they're on a great tear. But I do think that part of it, they've got to really reshape what their offense is because some guys are not getting consistent in some places. The defense is really working their tails off, and then you've got real good goaltending behind Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill. So I'm not saying, I don't think these are unproven rookies. I don't think so. I think these guys really have proved themselves. They've been thrown in the trenches. I watched the game against the Winnipeg Jets, and I thought Aiden Hill was great when I watched him up front. And I think the team, they're trending upwards, but how far of that can they get into before we get into the trenching months, with 26 games coming up? The Dallas Stars, they're clearly trending upwards. Listen, I've said this about about the Dallas Stars. They're going to be a team that's going to honestly look for a little more of offense. They're a defensive-centric team. They're going to be a threat in the playoffs. And I think Pete DeBoer has really put together a great chemistry with his team. I'm watching Jake Oettinger and Miro Heiskanen, Jason Robertson. A lot of these young kids are starting to get battle tested, and they're doing it at the right time. they've looked really good, and they've surpassed a bunch of teams. Minnesota, Winnipeg, and Colorado. You know, and even if you look at the rest of the Western Conference, I mean, they're right there with the Kings and the Kraken. So I think it is really interesting to see them really moving forward, where they'll be a very good defensive team, but they're going to give some teams some fits. Minnesota Wild, believe it or not, I'm going to say the Wild are trending up, because part of this is a lot of the talk is that, are they going to be trading away Matt Dumba? I don't think so. We've been in this topic of discussion now several times, because between him and Eunice Brodin, why would you want to break up that defense? And not to mention, too, the goalie tandem that they have in Minnesota, I think is great. There's no problems with it. I'm sure that they're probably going to end up addressing it somehow, some way. But offensively, I'm getting Kirill Kaprizov. They might actually trend more on offense when we come to the trade deadline, but I think Minnesota really can make that upper edge. St. Louis Blues, they're obviously trending down. Listen, Vladimir Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly gone. Now you have to deal with James Schwartz. You've got to deal with, a bunch of these guys on this offense. There's not a whole lot of consistency there with Craig Berube's group. And I think right now you watch St. Louis, they're not falling apart. They're just kind of that middle of the pack team, but they're not the same as they were when they won the Cup. And they pushed a lot of momentum. Now they did, because they did spend money when they got Torrey Krug after they lost Alex Pietrangelo to the deal to Vegas. And, several of these players, Jordan Binnington, he's got to get back to himself, man. Like, there have been times where, look, I get it with the chirps. I know it's great for hockey entertainment, but sometimes they can list you as little bits of liabilities. And that's where you don't want to be in that trending field. So I think that the one thing that you got to look at for the St. Louis Blues is they have to find consistency. I don't think they'll find it this year, but hopefully in the offseason they are going to find it. The Chicago Blackhawks, I'm trending them upwards because, let me be honest with you, they have got to get rid of Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. I'm seeing headliners right now. There are 4 or 5 teams interested in Patrick Kane, and there's a couple of them that are interested in Jonathan Toews. You have got to get draft compensation. You've got to get cap compensation and a lot of stuff, because Chicago, this is a joke. Like, they have not surpassed their offense for quite some time, and I think Chicago right now is just, they've got to make those moves. They've got to make a trade. So, and then finally, the Colorado Avalanche, they're trending up. I see the Avalanche to where they're going to get healthier. They are going to get better. They really are like, a needle hanging on a thread. So I think that the team right now, once they start to get a lot of their top guys healthy and they really, really start to make things happen, I believe that the Colorado Avalanche will be back in it. So trend up, trend down. That's where we are in the Western Conference. Hour number 2 coming up next live. It's the Snake Sports Talk Show.
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
Here we go, folks. Hour number 2 live in Las Vegas. It is the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening. We're live on every single social media platform known to the man. iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram. That is where you can like, follow, and subscribe, and hit the bell button for all latest notifications. Great hour one. Dan Holmi that was with me here earlier talking some Washington Capitals and the NHL playoffs, getting geared up for March 3rd, which is the NHL trade deadline. Lots and lots of great moves. Well, now we're shifting into hour two. Javier Reyes with Locked On Padres is going to be joining me. And then later on, Gil Martin with Locked On Islanders. I'm really excited for this President's Day edition of the Snake Sports Talk Show. So we're going to be shifting gears. Joining me live via the Global Satellite Network, presented by StreamYard, Javier Reyes. So, all right, so baseball season's right around the corner. And you know what? Like, there's nothing better to start the year off than World Baseball Classic, my friend. Like, I love it every time of year. 4 years watching this, you watch a lot of talents. And baseball, it's shifted that way, and it's been like that for quite some time. You get really good, nationwide players, and you're getting a lot of international players. How excited are you watching the World Baseball Classic? Because USA, they are going to try to defend their title, but I'm looking at, I'm looking at Dominican Republic. I'm watching Puerto Rico and a lot of teams. We're stacked this year, man. What do you think?
I can't wait, man. I mean, it's been a while, too. That's the other part, right? Like, it's been so long since last World Baseball Classic because of when the pandemic kicked off. That was what it was supposed to last be. And, the world ended, so we had to put it on pause. And now it's really, really exciting. And also, as the Padres guy, like, there's a lot of really great Padres players in this. So it's almost like this double sneak peek spring training. You're going to have spring training stuff where everybody can gossip about stuff that ultimately probably won't matter. You know what I mean? Like, it probably won't matter that blank pitcher gets absolutely torched in 2 minutes, but it gives us that, and it gives us that as fodder, and then it gives us the World Baseball Classic where we just get to see these guys in high pressure games, games that matter, and you're actually, you can't build on it necessarily for the regular season in baseball, but it's just really fun, man. Like, I love it so much, and I do love that it's one of the few areas where baseball has been kind of completely open. Like, there's no unwritten rules, there's none of that, really, because if you do that, if you start throwing at guys, it looks a lot worse when you're throwing at Puerto Rico. You know what I mean? Like, that's weird, or Venezuela, or China, or wherever. Like, it's any country. That would be really weird. It's the same thing when you play, like, when you look at hockey, right? Where hockey, you don't get the Olympic level hockey. It doesn't feel like you get the fights and whatnot. And believe it or not, I actually don't mind the fights as much as hockey, but I think that's a big thing, because at least in hockey, it's like, no, we're doing this. Like, let's go. You know what I mean? Not no behind the back, or we're going to hit you with a fastball and I'm 90 feet away so you can't hit me. None of that. I'm going on a tangent, but yeah, man, I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a blast, and it's just extra baseball. I don't think there's anything wrong with that ever.
Yeah, no, and I agree, man. I mean, I absolutely, I've grown up watching baseball. I played the sport as well, and I've had a lot of, big-time sports names to where, my biological father, he was scouted by Mike Lieberthal's dad. And so by that point, playing shortstop. So a baseball pedigree, in my back pocket, even for my stepdad, who played high school with the Kansas City Royals Hall of Famer, Mike Sweeney. He was his backup catcher at the time. And then just to see him grow and be a Kansas City Royal Hall of Famer, I mean, it's something special. So I've been around the game and really love, just the energy. And honestly, baseball taught me a lot of life. And that's where you see a lot of these adjustments that are coming in now because the talent is getting so big. But the other part is too, and we'll get deep into that a little later on, but I've said this in the show earlier, is that I like this run rule for the regular season, not the postseason, but the regular season, because nobody on a Tuesday night really wants to be staying up until the 18th inning because they got work in 3 hours, and then they've got to get rest. They got to be even when you got kids on a school night, I honestly like a little of that speed, a little bit of that tempo, because like in hockey, they go into overtime. If they don't score a goal from there, then they go into this shootout. And I think that is great for the regular season. In the postseason, completely different. What were your thoughts to the adjusted rule change? Because I think we're getting to that point now. This season's narrative is about rule adjustments, and it's, adding the extra runner, It's adding, that pitch count and really redefining what that means. So what are your thoughts on this season?
Look, man, first of all, I just think that in general, it is rich if there are people who follow baseball thinking that based on the trends that have happened over the last decade, that this sport should just stay the way it is and it should remain stagnant and it shouldn't try new things. No, actually, every sport has had things that have changed. The football has adjusted the catch rules, some for better or worse, whatever. And then the NBA, the shot clock back in the day used to be like 58 million hours long, right? And I think that one's a little bit more correlates with baseball. And you brought on the right guy, man. I love the zombie runner because for me, I just look at it almost statistically, where it's like, all right, this is going to affect maybe how many games overall for your team this year? Like 9 or 10 or something like that. There's 162. Okay, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Again, in regular season, I agree with you. In the postseason, we don't need extra tension and extra different rules to make the game exciting. It's already exciting in the postseason because every game matters. I don't understand what's the big deal of in August and the dog days of summer if it's like, hey, it's kind of cool. It makes you also kind of want to tune in to some of these other games, almost like it's a tiny bit of a red zone factor where you're like, oh, it could just be a single that can end this next game. And there's something exciting about that. I just like that it's different. I like that we get to see something a little bit different. I like the Field of Dreams game because it was different. It's such a long season that I don't understand why people complain so much about it. You're not going to see it that often. Oh, well, we lost on a bunt and a sacrifice fly. Well, then you should have won before, right? That's just, unfortunately, that's how it is, So I'm super excited for that. In terms of the other rules, look, it's going to be an absolute crap fest for the beginning. And you're going to get your take extraordinaires. They're going to log on to twitter.com or they're going to hop on the radio mic, such as yourself, but not necessarily you specifically. You're going to get your Mike Mad Dog or whatever being like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to baseball. Because I bet at the beginning there's going to be a lot of weird strike calls and a lot of weird walks and all that because guys are getting adjusted to it. Everyone has been warning about this. Will people listen? I don't know. If people will listen, but we'll see. I just think that overall it's great, and some friends of mine that I know really call minor league games and have experienced the pitch clock have been like, it's the best, man. Yes, at the beginning is a little weird, but saving time, 30 minutes on average, that's the low end of how much time you're saving. That's huge, man. It's 162 games, so that's always my big thing. I don't understand the resistance to change when the season is so long,
that's the dreadful part because of the fact that the pace of play is slow and it's long, man. And we're living in a caffeinated society. Everybody just has to get it quick. If it wasn't for Uber Eats in a lot of these places, we would not. For real, it's just you've got to have it right at my doorstep. And even for Amazon, I got to have my package here, Prime delivery and such. So my thought with it too, because I've grown up to where, playing ball and what I was taught, and I've had a really, really good hitting instructor who was a former major leaguer, and that was Bill Madlock. And he taught us a lot about hitting the opposite way because he looks at the trend of baseball. Everybody's trying to kill the ball. Everybody's trying to hit that long home run ball. But he said, I hate that, because it's if you get a home run, great. Everybody's chicks dig the long balls. I get it. But what really stands out from the boys to the men, if you're able to hit that right center gap, and when you've got runners at second and third, you are ultimately one of the greatest players that can play this game. And I watch a lot of these players where they do that because it's situational play. And when they took away the shift rule, here was my thought. Why are the players not bunting down third base? If you're a lefty, why are you not going opposite way? Because that's a free base for you. But everybody's like, no, you gotta swing for the fences, you gotta do that, you gotta make your payroll. And I've never liked that. I was like, it doesn't make any sense to me to get rid of the shift rule because you are being challenged. You know what you got to do? You got to outsmart them. Bryce Harper did this. Robinson Cano did this. These guys knew when I get shifted on, you're not getting me out. I'm getting a free base. So it's I never understood that rule. I never understood why hitting coaches are not implementing this more often because that's where true hitters come from. Home run kings, that's great and all. but I've always paid attention to the batting averages and the RBIs, because if you are a guy that's hitting above 300 or more, you are deemed like the best player in baseball. And with the runs batted in is even a bigger plus, because you are that run scoring machine. So that was always my thought with it. I've never understood with the shifting rule. I think it's kind of it's comical to me, but I think the rest of them, I'm with you on that. I think having that shift, because you need to fasten the game. You need to make it better to where, because look, you're not going to compete with views over the NFL or the NBA. We're just not. It's just not that kind of sport that's going to get that much media attention. But you can make it better to where, I've even said too, maybe even lessen the games a little bit, because it's not like 162 games. Yes, it's a long season, but maybe it doesn't even have to be like that all the time. I mean, I could settle for 125, even 130. And then I'll be fine with that. You'll still have your playoff teams. It also gives other teams that are low payrolls a chance to really, regroup, redevelop, get more talents in. So I'm curious to see what you think on this before we talk Padres, because I'm looking at the payroll systems for a lot of teams. And clearly the Dodgers, the Braves, the Cubs, even the Padres and a bunch of teams are starting to surpass that payroll, because it's a no salary cap league. But how would we possibly balance this for the bottom tier payroll teams? Because right now, I mean, we've got headliners. The A's are clearly going to be in Las Vegas. There is no doubt about that. I hate it when they teeter-totter this, because it's like, outside of Alameda, there is nothing left in Oakland. So how would you possibly balance this out to where you can get every team, all 30 clubs, competitive on the same level?
Well, that is the question, my friend. That is the question. Yeah, the poor A's, just for decades, their own owner essentially just try to sabotage their franchise and not pay, and then say, "Oh, nobody shows up." It's like, well, yeah, man, because you didn't do anything. There's like, I mean, have you seen the Coliseum? It looks like this thing's from the 1920s, right? And that says a lot, considering there's plenty of old stadiums that it feels old. I think that it's really tough, right? Because on the one hand, I do think that it says a lot with this like tax committee thing that has been formed, where like Dick Monfort of the Rockies is part of it. I do think it says a lot that a lot of teams are clearly threatened and annoyed that teams like the Padres and the Mets are really making them look bad. The Padres were like a bottom 5, market team. They barely had that much of an attendance record. They were okay every now and then when they were good, like many teams. But then you've seen over the past few years in the AJ Preller era that it's like, oh my God, yeah, you're bringing a ton of fans, a ton of coverage. You're getting more ESPN Sunday night baseball games, right? And I think a lot of owners are looking at it saying, oh my God, wait, no. I thought we were all in this together. Like, we're not supposed to spend anything and we're going to pretend that we're poor. I thought that was the whole thing. Like, that was the plan, guys. And that hasn't really happened. My vibe on this has always been, look, I'm not saying every team has to go out and spend $450 million like the Mets did this offseason or whatever, but there is a big issue where it's the only sport where consistently teams that are good will go backwards. Just take last year. The Milwaukee Brewers, the team that anyone who listens to my show, I hate the Milwaukee Brewers. That team was in first place. You can debate whether or not they got lucky, whatever. But it is the only sport where a first place team will just actively be like, our big move at the deadline is getting rid of one of our best assets and not getting anything else. That was their big move, and that's crazy, and that's a problem in baseball, right?
Oh, yeah, even in a wonky division like the Central.
Exactly. It's not even a good division. So all you have to do is figure out how to beat St. Louis. And how would you do that? You go out, maybe a few years ago, maybe bring in a better first baseman, maybe bring in, no shots at Rowdy Tellez, I know he's done okay, but George Springer, go sign him, go sign whoever. Some of these decent players, at least show an attempt. Because while I know everyone likes to fetishize and get excited about prospects and roster construction, not having contracts that are completely blowing up your team, the teams that spend money oftentimes are winning the World Series. Like, they are the ones that are winning. It's not $400 million, but the fact that they have some talent. The Astros, yeah, they've got some guys on that roster for sure that are making a lot of money. If this was the Milwaukee Brewers, they would have traded Jose Altuve already. They would have traded Alex Bregman. Heck, they probably would have found a way to trade Jordan Alvarez too. So that's the big issue, is that baseball has all these teams that won't do the bare minimum. Baltimore Orioles, great farm. I love their young talent. Gunnar Henderson, Grayson Rodriguez, even Cedric Mullins is a decent piece, right? Your big move was signing Adam Frazier. It's not like you're over the payroll. You're spending like what, 40, 30 million? So the disparity between the two, I don't know if it's a salary cap or a salary floor. I don't know exactly which one. People who are much better at economics and whatnot probably have a better take on that than me. But the bottom line is it's really astounding that issue is only in baseball. Like, imagine in the NBA right now, the Denver Nuggets, they were like, actually, we're trading away Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. It's like, what? Like, that would be crazy. And I think that's the big problem. And I think one of my favorite things was last year during the lockout. How many fans, and I have them screenshotted. I'm waiting for one day when I'm just like, I don't know, just bored. I have some screenshots of people being like, enough. It's millionaires versus billionaires. And like, just figure it out. Stop. I miss baseball. You're ruining so many people. And then those same fans being like, hey, why aren't my A's spending money? It's like, hey, maybe there's a connection there. Maybe that's what the lockout was about. I'm not saying that's all it was about, but that's kind of at least part of why players go on their wildcat streak and all that stuff.
And they're the same ones that you're going to see in the ballpark anyway. Like, they're going to complain it. And yet I'm out there on a Wednesday watching, a lot of these teams play. And it's just like, look, I have no complaints. Like, I've always been old school. I'm going to go out to a ball game. I'm going to have a great time. Even when we got the Las Vegas Aviators out here, A's farm system, I love watching them because I have just like a scouter's eyes. Like, I'm just seeing with what players are there, who's got the upper hand and potential to be really good major leaguers. Like, we're reverting back to old school with that, because it's like, that's how you saw a lot of talent. And I know, being here in Vegas, we had Bryce Harper, we had Chris Bryant, we had Joey Gallo, we have even one that's with the Houston Astros farm system, Vladimir Tarasenko. We had these guys, but you got to look for the next big thing, and you got to train these kids too. That's what baseball's been all about. You're training them about life. You're training them about, adversities. You're training them with this. So give a lot of these kids a chance. I mean, bottom line, you're going to have like 75% of them that are only going to make it to college level, and that's it. And then the rest of them, they either are going to be like myself, working with, the general public and just, doing our everyday stuff. And then there's always that one or two that really are promising prospects that make it in. So looking at the Padres this year. So last year, what a ride it was. NLCS against the Phillies. Now, I know it was a heartbreaker for a lot of Padres fans, but take me back to your reaction with the Juan Soto trade, because I was blown up when everyone was just like, yo, Juan Soto's going to the Padres. I said, what? Like, listen, I'm a diehard Charger fan. I've said this. I said, ever since the Chargers been out of San Diego, I knew they were going to make their money's worth somehow, because if you still got the Padres, you still got Petco Park, and you're right near the beach. I mean, that's where they're invested in. So what was your reaction to that Juan Soto trade? And like, how does that, like, it felt like the planets were realigning for the Padres, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and also, for the record, yes, I am a sad Chargers fan myself. I'm glad I have an ally. That's really great. Tough times, as always, with that team that finds a way.
Oh, good God.
Absolutely finds a way every year. Look, it's so funny, because when the Juan Soto trade was happening, it's just, this is the stuff you live for. And I think that's why a lot of Padres fans, because they're not known for making these moves, a lot of people are like, you know what, screw it, I don't care. This isn't the Yankees or another team that has made superstar moves before. The Padres have never done this. So for them, they're looking at prospects and be like, I don't care. And I'm like, I understand that more than I would understand that for some other teams, right? Because they're just not used to it.
Right.
This is a team that not so long ago would not pay, Chase Headley. Right, like they wouldn't pay him for like.
Oh God, I've been in that era where you guys had Chris Denorfia, you had Carlos Quinton, you had all these Alexi Amarista. Like, what?
He's a sleeper this year, guys. Draft him in fantasy.
Oh
and
God,
then I'm sitting there on my laptop. Look, it was a work day. I admit, I'm decent enough at multitasking, but I'm not gonna lie, half of my attention was elsewhere, usually at my phone. And it's just like, oh my God, like my heart is beating and everything. And then my mom is on the phone at the time, so I couldn't shout like a lunatic. But it was just like, oh my God, I get the Jeff Passan notification. You get all that rolling out. And it was just, that is what you live for in sports. It really is. It is the best feeling ever. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to result in a championship, but the fact that they even did it. And there are other teams out there that might have. You had the Cardinals rumors, and apparently Dylan Carlson was too much of a price for them to give up for like the best talent we've ever seen. But whatever. Thank you, St. Louis. I appreciate it. That it was just everything about it, because for so many years I've been doing my show, Locked On Padres, and just, all right, guys, that was a big move. Now I think that we should be excited about some tertiary things. And then they do Blake Snell and Yu Darvish in the span of 24 hours, right? And they sign Ha-Seong Kim. It's like, okay. But this year, they're going to come down and whatnot. Okay. And then they don't. And then they reignite again at the trade deadline. And they trade for Soto. And then they trade for Bell and Brandon Drury. And also,
they get Josh Hader in the middle of it.
They had traded for Josh Hader like 24 hours ago. So it was like this whole changing the culture of the Padres, which is like, we're the wheeling and dealing kings now. There's a new one in town, and I just think it's just incredible, man. It really is. And on top of that, when I got the alert that Eric Hosmer was going to be gone, the joy that I had, I was just, I cannot believe this. Like, this has to be a dream. I had just been given a couple days before the trade deadline, as a joke, like birthday present, a Eric Hosmer City Connect shirt and whatnot, because they were like, we know you're his biggest fan. And it was really funny. And then 2 days later he gets traded. So that shirt is now being, it's crystallized, it's hung up, it is golden. I have to make sure I use that at the right time. You know what I'm saying? I have to use it to magic. But yeah, man, it's just a blast. And it's a reflection for all these other teams. There are other teams that could make big moves. Not that all of them don't, but one team was in first place and traded their best asset away. Another team was like, we're not scared of the Dodgers. Bring it on. We're bringing in Juan Soto. And I think that that's not just great for the Padres, but great for the game.
Yeah, and honestly, because I've never, ever thought in my life that, San Diego would have honestly came up with a lot of that payroll, and they were just aggressive spenders. They did it again this year. And so this is interesting to outlook at, because Eric Hosmer and Will Myers, they are gone. Now you move Ha-Seong Kim to second base and Jake Cronenworth to first. In comes Xander Bogaerts. We know he was going to be a big fish out of Boston, because Boston had the choice. Do you want to re-sign Rafael Devers or Xander Bogaerts? I felt like Bogaerts was out of the door because he was going to look for his money's worth. And Devers at least got his extension, rightfully so. And it was right on paper. Now you're seeing Fernando Tatis Jr. in left field. That's a little interesting. What's your outlook of the Padres this year? Because I think they're going to be better than what last year was. But I'm looking at that pitching rotation. I think their bullpen is set. I think it looks really good. So how would you outlook the Padres this year? And I think this should be the meal ticket to be threats in the postseason again, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think last year they were a sleeper. I think, heading into the season, that they were a team that you looked at the starting pitching. You still had Manny. We thought we would have Tatis at one point. That didn't happen. But I think that with this team, like you said, the starting rotation is clearly some issues. But I do think the pickup of Michael Wacha, while he's not going to be incredible, you at least don't have to worry about, oh God, either Martinez or Lugo have to hit as a starter.
And
I think
he's
they're
serviceable.
Bullpen guys. Be serviceable. At least Wacha, you're like, okay, there's a little bit more of a track record of him being serviceable. It wasn't about getting someone good. It was just about getting a guy to fill in the slot. So I did like that move, regardless of my opinions on Wacha as a pitcher specifically. But with the rest of the team, and I also think it's going to be a little fluid. There might be some days that Ha-Seong Kim plays short again, and then Xander Bogaerts, maybe he does second base. There might be Tatis back there. They might put Tatis at DH sometimes. I know that they have some DHs. They have Matt Carpenter. They have Nelson Cruz. It's going to be really interesting. I think that there's going to be a lot more wiggle room with this Padres lineup, and I trust Bob Melvin to kind of manage that. I think it's going to be cool. Like, managing, platoon splits and all of that stuff. When are you going to bat, Cruz? Like, is Cruz going to be back in general? Is Matt Carpenter's power going to hold up from what we saw last year, which was pretty incredible. He just turned into Ruth for like 48 games. So I'm
Yep.
really curious to see how that pans out. And with the pitching, all they have to do is just be fine enough. And I agree with you. I think the bullpen can be absolutely dynamite this year. I think Robert Suarez is like a top 10 relief pitcher in the league. I think they know that, and I think that's why they paid him this offseason. And Hader, I think, is going to be excellent this year. All of the statistics, for the most part, seem like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a bounce back. I'm a little bit skeptical, but still, it sounds like he's going to be great again. And if Drew Pomeranz can be healthy, and if for some reason Nick Martinez or Seth Lugo, they figure out their pitching rotation, maybe an Adrian Morejon breaks out or whatever, Jay Groom, these type of guys, then you get those guys to be in your bullpen. And those guys have shown a very successful track record of in the bullpen, especially
That's right.
Martinez as of late. Martinez almost practically got paid because of how good he did in the bullpen towards the end of last year and in the postseason. So that's what I think. I think they're going to be tremendous, and I think that adding the Bogarts, which, first of all, gave us two things. It gave us Xander Bogaerts, and second, it gave us that hilarious Boston Globe article of Chaim Bloom just sitting in thought, contemplating like it was the end of some artsy movie, like, you know what I mean, like the end of Moneyball or something like that. Just like, where did I go wrong, man? And I'm like, this is the funniest thing ever, that the Boston Red Sox are pretending to be poor. But anyway, I thought that was incredible. And with Xander, obviously there's some questions about everybody, but the possible Justice League lineup that the Padres have, not to mention if Grisham can just, I don't know, hit above 200, if Jake Cronenworth can bounce back a little bit, if Ha-Seong Kim keeps improving, those are awesome role players. And then the Justice League lineup of Tatis, Xander, Manny, and Soto is one of the best in all of baseball, and I think is going to make for a lot of fun this year. I mean, at the minimum, it's going to last to watch. I really do believe that, and I can't wait.
I feel like the rejuvenation of the Padres, because I've even seen small spurts. You know, I was born in '95, but watching that team where you had Ken Caminiti, you had Trevor Hoffman, you had the late great Tony Gwynn. It's great to have energy back in San Diego again. I mean, I've heard a lot of people give me recommendations like go to Petco Park. It's beautiful. It's a great time to be there.
I still gotta go too, man.
Yeah, even if you're not a Padre fan, like you're there in the ballpark. There's so much activities there. I can't wait to go to it. I told myself I'd love to make a trip there just to see the ballparks and even do a ballpark tripping to where, because the only closest I've been to is I've been to Yankee Stadium since I was 6, the original one, before the new one started to come out. Yeah. And then I walked on Yankee Stadium when I was 13, when they were building the new one, and we did the whole tour. Being there and feeling the energy of every single legendary player at home plate was just incredible. But I watched this team, and I think there some of it I was almost like, whoa, pump the brakes, time out a bit, because I know San Diego. There's times where they'll get in that spurt and then they cool down. But now I'm kind of absolutely sure about them this year, and I think between them and the Dodgers in the NL West, that is going to be a shootout for the ages for both these teams. I think it's going to be great. My final thought before we let you go. So I want your thoughts on the Manny Machado thing, because this is weird. And I'm like, and look, I've known Manny Machado, following him from his Baltimore days to all the way where he is in San Diego. He's just a guy looking for more money. And I'm like, and so the Padres, their assignment, this is about winning it all this year, because they're like, well, if Manny's going to be opting out and he wants more money, then we better start, making this happen right now. What were your thoughts on Manny Machado?
No surprise, of course. It's totally his entitlement and whatnot. My thing is, look, I don't have necessarily sources in the organization and whatnot, but the way I look at it is, I put this out yesterday where, look, the Aaron Judge thing, it was very similar. The difference is that was viewed a little bit more as a slight, because it seems like the Yankees leaked how much money he turned down, which of course backfired on them, but he still ended up re-signing with them. Someone pointed out to me, well, the bad version of that is Xander Bogaerts. Like, agreed, but the Padres over the last few years haven't shown a trend like the Red Sox have of wanting to cut back and spend money. So I doubt that all of a sudden they'd be like, Manny is the one that we're going to try and cut back on. It's just a little hard for me to believe. Now, totally possible. I never underestimate the gall and the audacity of any rich people, but I think that it's totally possible. And I think that you look at what happened this offseason, you look at the Soto trade, and you look at the Ohtani rumors, which I don't know how founded they are and whatnot, in terms of like, I don't know how they're going to outbid the Mets and the Dodgers if that's what happens next year, or even the Giants. I think that they're prepared either way. I think they're saying, all right, if he does go, if he gets some giant contract, maybe we allocate that money elsewhere. We still have Xander. We still have Tatis. We have at least Soto for another year. Maybe we try and work on his extension. So I think that they have a bunch of plans in place in case it does not work. And if they do re-sign Manny, maybe that means Soto's gone. So it's a lot of different decisions for the Padres going forward. Good decisions, I think. It's good to be in this position rather than, the Brewers, like we mentioned earlier, right? I think that it's very weird. There's a lot of conflicting reports that they were $145 million off. Again, it's just odd to me. Like, you've spent a lot of money you just extended Yu Darvish. It would feel very sudden and very odd for you to try and pull the hometown discount. You love it here. Let's give him $20 million average annual value a year. You know what I'm saying? I just don't know entirely if that makes sense. We're going to see what happens, though. And the good news for Padres fans for right now, which is he's clearly going to be motivated to have an incredible year before his free agency period.
Yep.
So, if we get another MVP form of Manny Machado, that would be absolutely excellent, even if it is his final year as a Padre. And if it is, I would be sad. I don't think it's the end of the world. Because, again, this is a team that does have other superstars on its roster, which a lot of other teams can't say. The Red Sox let Mookie Betts walk away, right? That was kind of insane. Or they traded him, I should say. So, with this guy, I'm just excited, man. I'm excited, and I think that while it is weird, like you said, about the contract stuff, I don't know. I mean, we have to see how the season transpires. And, again, I point back to the Aaron Judge thing. Like, this thing could just be, oh wow! Remember when everyone freaked out? They just paid him $350 million. So what are we doing? So I'm excited.
That's true, and it's crazy because San Diego, they built themselves an absolute juggernaut. They're going to be exciting to watch. I'm going to be keeping an eye on them all season long because thank God baseball being back. World Baseball Classic right around the corner. It doesn't get any better than that on the season, but I'm excited for it. There's a lot of storylines. There always is every year, and so I'm excited to see which teams in the AL and the NL are going to come out on top, and we'll see representing in the World Series. And who knows? Maybe the Padres, this could be the year that they could do it. But I appreciate your time, Javier. Where can everybody find you on everything San Diego Padres this season?
Absolutely, man. Firstly, you can follow me at Javipino, JAVIIPNO. I've been tweeting Padres stuff there, but sometimes some comic book movie randomness and dumb thoughts. So if you want only Padres stuff, that's at LO_Padres or Locked On Padres on YouTube. And yeah, check it out. With the season heating up, it's going to be a lot of fun. Lots of cool ideas and guests and show ideas and blah, 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 blah. Good time to be a baseball fan and definitely a good time to be a Padres fan.
You're absolutely right about that. Always good to be a baseball fan, and especially with NBA and NHL coming around the corner to playoff time. It's going to be a lot of exciting stuff, but it's always exciting because that's when the gates open, pitchers and catchers report, and then spring training. I can't wait for it for the baseball season. Thank you so much, Javier. Appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day, and we will definitely see how the Padres do this season.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on, man.
Absolutely. So, of course, we end up changing the subject, going from baseball, and we are turning back into the NHL because we have so much great stuff to talk about here. Gil Martin, he's got a great book, Ice Wars, that is big on New York-based rivalries in sports. Got to definitely look at it. He's joining me live now via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard. All right, so we're getting close to the trade deadline coming in on March 3rd. The Islanders made a big splash this just close to the trade deadline, but Bo Horvat, I said this. I think this was a good fit for the Islanders because of the fact of they are filling in the hole that they missed with Jordan Eberle from the expansion draft. So I think plugging him into this offense with Brock Nelson and Josh Bailey and a lot of these guys, this is maybe going to help to kind of secure that battery and that balance. How do you kind of see this playing out for the Islanders coming close to the playoffs?
I like the deal in the sense that they needed some more scoring. And to me, Bo Horvat is an Islanders kind of player because he does the little things right. He's very good on face-offs. He helps the power play, and the Islanders certainly need help on the power play as of recent weeks. He can help on the PK. and he's got leadership qualities. I mean, he was the captain in Vancouver. So I think when you add all that up and you add the fact that he just signed an 8-year extension, without the extension, I was a little skeptical about the deal. But once he signed, I think for the long term, it was a good move by the Islanders.
Yeah, I think it's a really good move too, because of the fact of it's really helping a lot of these guys on the offense. And you're right, he's a New York Islander kind of guy. He's a guy that's full of grit. He's a guy that really never turns down an opportunity when he's got one. And at the very least, give the energy that the Islanders group really, really needs. So this was interesting of the season because end of the era for Barry Trotz. And comes the next head coach. What were your thoughts when the season before it started, how this team was really going to group up? And were they at some point going to maybe adjust and change some things that may have made them better to where they are right now?
Yeah, I mean, Lane Lambert, when he took over, and he had been an assistant under Barry Trotz going all the way back to their time in Nashville. So a long, long time he was working under Trotz as an assistant. And he said he wanted to get the defensemen a little more involved in the offense, wanted them to pinch a little bit more, to try to create a little bit more. And early in the season, that worked really well. But now, defensively, they seem to be missing a lot of assignments, and these breakdowns have been costly. So there's a little bit of a question. Look, this is his first year as an NHL head coach. To rush and judge him is, in my mind, a little bit premature. You got to at least give him the season. The thing that's sort of hanging over all of this, though, Lou Lamoriello is in the last year of his contract as Islanders GM. Does he come back next year? If he does, Lane Lambert, I think, has a better chance of staying. If he doesn't, the new GM may want to hire a new coach and bring in his own guy. And I think if the Islanders don't make the playoffs, then Lane Lambert may be on the hot seat big time.
I had when I heard the headliner, this was years ago, when they had said John Tavares is going back home to Toronto for 7 years. I said, the Islanders will look really different without John Tavares in the building. We know we had a lot of great memories with him there, up in Nassau. But I think that because of that trend, it really changed a lot of the culture of the Islanders, because Anders Lee, a lot of these other young cats coming in. I've even said this too. When they traded for J.G. Padjo a couple of years ago, I said, this is probably the perfect fit, because this is a balancer of a guy who could be a puck distributor. And when he has the opportunity, when the net is open on his corner, he's going to be able to shoot it. And I think that was what the Islanders looked for. So in the last couple seasons, since the John Tavares signing of Toronto, what have you seen the change in the culture of this team? Because I'm looking at it, it's energetic. I love the yes, yes, yes men that are there in the Coliseum. I mean, how great does this look for this team?
Yeah, I mean, they became more of a blue collar, where we may not be more talented than you, but we're going to outwork you kind of a team. And it worked to the extent that they went to back-to-back conference finals in the playoffs in 2020 and 2021. I think Barry Trotz was the perfect guy to implement that system. And, the Islanders became one of those teams that nobody wanted to play against, especially in a playoff series, because they wear you down. And, they always, the saying in the locker room was, we want to be a team that's difficult to play against. And when they were at their best, they really were.
Yeah, and they looked incredible. That's where I was just like, this is a sleeper team. I see them really becoming a threat in the playoffs, because watching a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference where you had, Tampa Bay is great. There's no doubt about it. But you're seeing other teams like the Hurricanes are starting to kind of knock on the door. Then you got the New York Rangers. They got Vladimir Tarasenko. So that's got to be great for New York sports media, because the fact of New York teams are really trending upward with the Islanders and Rangers, the Mets and the Yankees, and a lot of these teams. So it's great energy. And then at some point, if they get the quarterback right, we might see the Jets really make. So this has been great for New York media. But I've asked this question. I had Dan Holmi on my show earlier in the first hour, and I asked him. I said, I'm watching this trend in hockey, much like I watched this trend in the NFL. Like this year, we had a lot of injuries. And it's like, you can't go a season without a really good serviceable backup quarterback. So I almost translate this to the NHL. You can't make a substantial season without a really good serviceable goaltender. What have you seen from Semyon Varlamov and for Eli Sorokin this year that they've really played to their best potential?
Yeah, I mean, those guys are so important to the Islanders, especially since they are still, even under with the changes under Lane Lambert, a defense-first team. And Sorokin really has been outstanding. He's probably going to be a Vezina Trophy finalist. I mean, Olmark in Boston is far and away the favorite. He's going to win it, barring an injury or a complete collapse. But I think Sorokin deserves to be in the conversation, deserves to be one of the 3 finalists. And as far as Varlamov is concerned, yeah, he didn't have a particularly good game Saturday in Boston, but none of the Islanders did. But to be a guy who's going to play every 3rd game and still be sharp and still keep your team in it and give them a chance to win it, as far as backup goalies go, it'd be tough to do too much better.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And the fact that just the competition around them has just really heightened up, especially not in just the Metro, but even all around in the Eastern Conference. And you're even seeing a lot of teams in the Western Conference. Like I've said this before, and you could definitely comment on this, but every year, January, February, and March, this is where you have to find your identity, and you've really got to get locked in because there are teams that they found their identity, like the Stars defensive team. That's their identity. Pete DeBoer's really shaped that culture. The Colorado Avalanche, hyper-aggressive scoring team. That's their identity. So when you look at the identity of the Islanders, then you've seen this where they're struggling defensively. What has been the true identity, and is there something they have to adjust before the playoffs come around the corner?
Yeah, I think in the past, especially under Trotz, defense first was their primary identity. And when Lane Lambert made that change where the defensemen are going to pinch more and join the rush a little bit more, I don't know if this team has found its identity yet under Lane Lambert because there have been so many defensive breakdowns or inconsistency, let's put it that way, more than anything else. And I think with the Bo Horvat trade, and I think Lou Lamoriello will probably make one more move before the deadline. It's not going to probably be as big as the Bo Horvat move, but I expect another move or 2 that this team has to find its identity and find it quickly because it's a very tight race in the Eastern Conference for the playoffs. And, they're one of 6 teams chasing 2 wild card spots. So if you're going to find your identity, you better do it real soon. Let's put it that way.
Oh, I agree with you there. Gil Martin joining me here on the show. So in situational, in-season situational play. So we're coming into close to the trade deadline. We know they made a big move getting Bo Horvat, and they're in the wild card spot because they're right there behind the Pittsburgh Penguins, but there's teams that are outside looking in. Buffalo, Florida, Washington. Are we quite done seeing the Islanders make moves, or is there something there that the general managing they might actually have in the cards? What are you hearing so far?
Well, I mean, the problem now is that Matthew Barzal left Saturday's game against Boston with a lower body injury. In fact, they haven't confirmed it, but it looked very much like a lower body injury. Mm-hmm. We don't know how long he's going to be out. He may even be able to play tonight. He may not. I hope to learn more at the morning skate this morning. If he's out, I don't know if it's wise for the Islanders to go all in and try to make the playoffs this year. It may be time to trade off a couple of expiring contracts, get some picks and prospects, and retool the farm system, because the farm system has been depleted by some of the trades Lou Lamoriello has made. But if Barzal is okay, you may need a secondary scorer, and you may be looking for a puck-moving defenseman because the Islanders have struggled with that transition game of clearing the puck out of their zone and starting the attack. So you need to sort of reaffirm that and improve that area. And if they can do that, and Barzal is healthy and Horvat integrates himself into the team, then they're competing for that playoff spot.
Yeah, I can tell you. I mean, there's been a lot of teams now. Like, there's been adjustments for some. Like, I do a segment on the show, and I'm going to be doing it here just afterward, where I did it for the Western Conference, where there's trend up, trend down, and part of that breakdown is trending up is not just winning games. It's what are you doing behind that that's allowing you to win the games. Like I said, the Golden Knights. That's nice that they're winning 5 games in a row, but how long of that streak can they keep up before the potentially, and I hope it doesn't happen, but the collapse happens? Because we've seen this with teams. They've collapsed in it, and they don't look the same come the playoff streak. And then trending down where they're struggling in areas. They've got to make some moves, and they've got to make it happen. So there's a lot of big time names that are still out there for the trade deadline to come around. I mean, Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, several teams. What's a name that stands out to you that you think might be a little of an X factor if he goes to one team?
Two guys that I think have the biggest impact at the trade deadline. Timo Meier of San Jose, I think could help a lot of teams offensively, and he's still relatively young, so I think he could have a big impact if someone could sign him and line him up long term. And then as far as defenseman goes, Jeff Chikrin of Arizona, to me, they already pulled him off the ice in anticipation of a trade. That was a week ago, and he still hasn't been traded. So maybe something fell through that we don't know about. But again, both of those players in their 20s, mid 20s to late 20s, on top of their game, in their prime, and players who could have both a short-term and a long-term impact in the right place.
Yeah, I think so too, because I know Timo Meier, he's right now the big fish that's swimming in that is waiting to, figure out, is he getting traded? Because I know that that's a big asset for the offense. Wherever he might go to, he might even go to a team that they're established on offense. So when he gets plugged in, he's going to be fitting comfortably with the right situational play. And I think the chemistry will be really, really good up into the end. So explain to me a little bit of the book, Ice Wars, because I've watched New York rivalries, man, and I've been to New York 6 times in my life. Because I have family that live up in Long Island. My mother was originally from Smithtown down there in Suffolk County. And there was a time where we did go up to Nassau, see a little of that. What's the book really about? Because I love rivalries in sports. I think it's important because of the fact of it draws revenue, it draws views. So how did you explain this in the book? Because I'm kind of interested to seeing it.
Well, the book is about the history of the rivalry between the Islanders and the Rangers. And I grew up on Long Island. That was sort of my introduction to hockey because, in addition to driving revenue, which it totally does, rivalries drive passion.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about Islanders and Rangers, and I go back to the 70s and 80s and really the beginning of that rivalry, your best friend could be rooting for the other team. And you have that friendly, but not always friendly kind of a banter going back and forth. And, look, 99% of the time it's respectful, even though it's passionate. Right. But some of the best hockey that I saw growing up at the Nassau Coliseum, at Madison Square Garden, Rangers versus Islanders, just got me to really love the game. And so I go back and look at some of the best games, some of the best players, some of the best moments. I interviewed more than 50 players, coaches, broadcasters, and really got an in-depth perspective on the history of the rivalry dating all the way back to the formation of the Islanders in 72.
God, and a lot of great names all amongst it. I mean, even the time when watching the growth and development of Big Z's and Chara with the Islanders, and then you fast forward and the one year the Rangers win with Mark Messier and a lot of those great players from there. But I love the narrative of the 80s because of the fact of the Islanders were so tough. I compared this to the Jordan against the Piston eras because first of all, Jordan would never be able to win a championship by himself. That's just not possible. But when I watched that, watching Wayne Gretzky at his prime, I mean, the Islanders were giving him fits. And it was just like Edmonton could not get past that hump unless they were really getting the right guys. Glenn Coffey, and even for Mark Missy and a lot of those guys up front, man. I mean, it changed a lot of the culture. And then watching the Islanders during that time when they won those 4, I mean, it was a dynasty in the making. So it was great seeing a history like that with the Islanders, but I've reverted them like the Detroit Bad Boys because they were they were in your face, they were hyper-aggressive scoring, and they played great defense. And, I'd love to check this book out because watching New York sports rivalries like the Rangers and Islanders, I mean, even being a baseball guy, it's like I watched, the Yankees and Dodgers, the Dodgers and the Giants, Yankees, Red Sox. Like you love that kind of, hype atmosphere and the energy being in it. There's nothing like it. But I appreciate your time, Gil. Where can people find you on everything New York Islanders?
Well, the podcast is Locked On Islanders, wherever you get your podcasts, also on YouTube. The podcast Twitter handle is at Locked On Isles, and you can find me on Twitter at Ice Wars NYR VSNYI, which is from the title of the book.
There you go, guys. And if those of you who are diehard hockey fans and also love the New York sports rivalry and want to know more about it, check out Ice Wars with the rivalry between the Rangers and Islanders. Gil Martin is the author on that book. Great stuff. Can't wait to read it. Gil, it was a pleasure having you up on here on this President's Day weekend. Have a great and fantastic day, and we'll see what the rest of the season's going to look like come playoffs.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love rivalries like that. And what great interviews that we had all together. I mean, Javier Reyes, great with the Padres. Gil Martin, great with the Islanders. I told you it was going to be such a long-filled, President's Day weekend day, but I'm glad, we're already 2 hours in, and we're getting ready for hour number 3, and you can't wait to see what I've got in store here up on the show. But, I got to revert it to a bunch of those, a bunch of the interviews is that, and Javi's right, because the fact that the Padres have never been a aggressive spending team. They've never had that. They've never had that identity. And so by that point, the O'Malleys come around, and then all of a sudden it changed the culture and it changed the chemistry of, San Diego sports, because now the Chargers are in LA and the Padres, they've got all the money in the world where they can spend it on big time guys. So, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Xander Bogaerts. They even get guys from the farm system. I mean, Jake Cronenworth, Trent Grisham. And, and so this is going to be an exciting time being a Padre fan because they've got a real good rotation. I keep an eye on that. The bullpen looks stacked. And then you've got guys on offense. You can't even pitch around. That Juan Soto trade, when that first broke out, that was nuts. I never thought San Diego would have been on that trend, but they did it. They made it work. They made it happen. And that was what was really exciting for it. And then Gil Martin, who was on Locked On with Locked On Islanders, great guy. I can't wait to read the book. I definitely got to end up checking it out, seeing if I can get maybe an online copy or something like that. But it's true, though. Like rivalries in sports, they just hold an importance to it because it's what grows the vibe of the sport. And it's also, you get so much entertainment and there's views behind it. So I love it. I can't wait to read the book. But it's true, though. The Islanders, they've struggled on defense. They've really got to find that identity for them moving into potentially to the playoffs, because if they miss it, then there's no point in risking with what's going to happen with Matt Barzal. So they really have to reevaluate what else that they've got going on, because it's 26 games left in the season. And we've got the trade deadline in March 3rd. They go and get the big fish in Bo Horvat. They extend him. They get his money's worth. And he just looks and feels like New York. So I was really happy with the trade. And I think Semyon Varlamov and Eli Sorokin, I think they're real good goaltending tandems. They're going to be really fun to watch. So I can't wait. So let's go ahead and let's do the trend up, trend down while we're wrapping up hour number 2. So I've literally looked at, so we had the Western Conference that we saw. Now we're going to transfer to the East. So the Eastern Conference, obviously Boston's trending up. There is no doubt about that. Boston is just unbelievable. Linus Ullmark was a diamond in the rough as a goaltender. And coming from a Buffalo system, that once he came into Boston and Montgomery, their head coach, this is an incredible roster for the Boston Bruins. And this is, I think potentially this is the last bit you will get with these three. David Pastrnak, Patrice Bergeron, and of course, Brad Marchand. So these guys, they really are the leaders that are leading this group to the promised land. But the way that this team has been playing, they're already surpassing. They're going to be the favorites to maybe potentially winning the President's Trophy. So I'm kind of excited to see what's going to happen with the Bruins. Trending up the New Jersey Devils. Look, I think they could be interesting team going into the trade deadline if they do decide to make a move. But I thought getting Dougie Hamilton, the retirement of PK Subban, and a couple of it really changed the group. And Vitek Vanacek, that we mentioned earlier, he's playing great with New Jersey. So he's playing to the absolute extent as they should. So I think this was great. I think also, too, Jack Hughes has finally arrived. Are you all happy now? Jack Hughes is really starting to play really good for the Devils. There is some exciting stuff from here. Toronto Maple Leafs, I see them trending upward. They get Ryan O'Reilly. I think they've got a true leader amongst them because you've got a group of youngsters with Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander. You need to have some leadership. Now, don't get too caught in the lights of leadership because of the fact you saw what happened with Joe Thornton. You saw what happened with Patrick Marleau. You know how that worked. And I think Ryan O'Reilly was the right choice because at least you get a really good balanced puck distributor. And you also get somebody who's also aggressive offensively. That is what the team needs. And he's got playoff experience. So this is going to help the Toronto Maple Leafs really get over that hump. I'll be watching them from the first round of the playoffs, but I better hope that I see some improvement with them. The New York Rangers, they're clearly trending up by a mile. I mean, Vladimir Tarasenko in that trade, hyper-aggressive offense now. He's coming into a really good group. Gerard Gallant is going to have so much fun messing around with this group, really kind of make some adjustments that really work because going into the playoffs, they went into the Eastern Conference Final last year. They were a tough team, and Igor Shesterkin was on fire. So they played the hot hand. They were very competitive up to that point. So I think the Rangers will give teams fits. But the Eastern Conference right now, I mean, it's an interesting look. The Washington Capitals, I think they're trending downward. The Capitals right now, because defensively, there has been some liabilities. Because right now, outside of John Carlson, there really hasn't been anybody there. And we had Dan Holmi earlier in the first hour where he explained that. They've got to make some moves, possibly, maybe not in the trade deadline, but maybe in next year's off season. They got to make some moves to get some right puck distributing defenders, but they've also got to have some guys that are willing to support their goaltending. So that's what I kind of feel from there. All right. And then, of course, too, my kind of trend upward a little bit, but I don't know if they make the playoffs this year. It's kind of a tough stretch, but the Buffalo Sabres, I mean, Tage Thompson really has looked like the real deal. And this is the kind of culture Buffalo needed to have. A serious culture change. I think he's the right guy. Everybody else, there's nobody like it. I think the Eastern Conference is in real good hands, but I think he might be in a position where Buffalo, if they do make the playoffs or they don't, they are on the maps now where they are going to be potentially that team you want to look out for. So whether they do or they don't, Buffalo's in a good position. They're in a really, really good position to coming up on. So, all right, hour number 3 coming up next, live in Las Vegas. It is the Snake Sports Talk Show. Be back here in a moment.
SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more, go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your first purchase.
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
All right, folks, here we go. Hour number 3 in the city that doesn't sleep. That is live in Las Vegas. It is the Snake Sports Talk Show wherever and however you may be watching and listening. We are live on every single platform known to man, iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. That is where you can like, follow, and subscribe to the show and hit the bell button to keep you up to date on future and past shows. We are now on the tail end. I did not sleep. I've got coffee with me. I am really tackling all this out. Shout outs to Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals. Really good in the first hour. Second hour, we were stacked with even more with Javier Reyes on the Padres and Gil Martin on the Islanders. So here we are at hour number 3, and I've got a treat for you. And he talks a lot about those Minnesota Wild. So joining me here via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard, Seth Toupal. So, I watched Minnesota in the last couple seasons, and I don't know what to think of them because I'm like, they are literally like a needle on the thread hanging on, man. Like, because it's a team that I love their offense with Kirill Kaprizov. I also do like their defense with Matt Dumba and Eunice Brody. Like, they're the kind of team that if you go toe-to-toe in 7 rounds, that team's going to give you a little bit of fits. What have you seen from the Minnesota Wild this year? Because I try to put a finger on it. I can't figure it out. What have you seen this year from them?
Well, it's a team this year that has had to fight and claw way more for wins than they did last year. They had the unbelievable offense last year, broke every franchise record that they previously had with Kirill, with Kevin Fiala, with all those other guys that had career seasons. This year, the offense hasn't been there, and so they've had to rely more on power play scoring. They've had to rely more on defense and goaltending, and within the last couple of weeks, it's been a real struggle to come away with goals, and we're seeing some signs that this team is starting to kind of get out of that a little bit. The last couple of games have been much better in terms of generating chances, and so it's a team that's going to have to fight all the way through to the end of the year. They just don't have the firepower to really match teams like Dallas, teams like Colorado. And so in order to beat those teams, they're really going to have to keep it tight and are going to have to try to slow those teams down. And so we're seeing some progression from this team to where maybe they can start to get things going towards a playoff spot. But yeah, it has been about the polar opposite that it was last year to this year. Just not as many exciting overtime wins as we saw last year, but it seems like they're maybe starting to fight their way out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, they're an interesting team all the way through and through. I knew that, with the departure of Kevin Fiala, it was going to take a hit on the offense. I mean, I'm watching him right now with the LA Kings, and he's really fit himself in well with Victor Arvidsson, with a lot of the youngsters there. And so watching this team, what's the status you've heard about Matt Dumba? Because I've heard headliners on him. They said there's a possibility he may be traded, there maybe not be. But I've watched it several times, and I'm like, I haven't seen Minnesota move that defense once because it's like they hold on for as much as they can, and then they end up making the playoffs, and then they look real good. What are you hearing about Matt Dumba so far?
It's an interesting case with Dumba because he is not the same player that he was in his prime. Injuries have kind of robbed some of that skill set from him over the last couple of years. And so with him being an unrestricted free agent in the offseason, it just seems like we're getting to the point finally that his chapter with Minnesota is coming to an end. He's been subject of trade rumors for like 6 years in a row. So it's nothing new. It just seems like with his contract status being up, that there finally is going to be kind of a different route that he ends up going. The team's got younger options defensively to fill in, and with limited cap space over the next couple of seasons, they're going to err more towards that as opposed to retaining guys. It's just trying to find cheaper options to fill open spots. Now, as for a trade, it's hard to say because from the sounds of it, there aren't a whole lot of teams that are really kicking the tires on Dumba before the trade deadline. He is an option, but it seems like teams are looking at guys a little higher up that can give you maybe more offensive production or are a true defensive defenseman. So it's a situation where Bill Guerin, I'm sure, is keeping an eye on it. And if Dumba gets hot and looks good for a couple of games before the deadline, that may change. But at this point, it does seem like the trade route for him is a little quieter than we had expected it to be as we get close to the trade deadline.
Yeah, and a lot of names, and a lot of just momentum changes. I mean, the fact that we watch the Islanders, they get Bo Horvat. I think they found a really good replacement since they lost Jordan Eberle to the expansion draft. And then watching Vladimir Tarasenko tearing it up with the Rangers. And then I don't know if Toronto is really going to get over that hump. Now they got Ryan O'Reilly. I mean, there have been first round woes with this team. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to be bought in because they'll reel you in so close. And then there's a whole like cesspool of disappointment. And so I'm like, I don't know. But I'm watching a lot of youngsters right now, young up and coming rising stars. Jack Hughes, he's arrived in New Jersey. Jason Robertson is tearing it up in Dallas. Watching the emergence of Kirill Kaprizov, because it's like the Wild needed something new that could help with their offense because they've already moved past with, Zach Paris and then, Ryan Suter. And now, because now you're asking Jared Spurgeon to be that big time guy. What have you seen with Kirill Kaprizov and his growth with this team that could eventually help, with the culture of this franchise and maybe potentially they could shoot to be further and beyond in the playoffs if all things go well?
Well, I think what he can bring to the table can really be outlined by the fact that he holds now pretty much every franchise record in his first 3 years in the league. He's shattered the goals in a season record, shattered the points record. He has that true game breaker type skill sets that we haven't seen with this team since Marian Gaborik. And with Gaborik, he was a player that had a ton of injuries that he dealt with throughout his career. Kirill doesn't have that. He is a player that just has amazing speed, amazing puck handling ability. We've seen him add some physicality to his game this year to where if teams try to be physical with him to slow him down, he's not afraid to mix it up and dish it right back. And I think if you want a good indication of what he can do to help this team as they continue to push for a playoff spot, look at what he did against Nashville yesterday. He had 2 goals, and he just had that look of a player that was not going to let this team lose that game. It was a game that the Wild absolutely needed, and they needed to get both points in that one. And he just had that look about him of somebody that was not going to take anything other than a win. And being that player, especially with this team struggling to score goals, being that guy who can step up to the front of the line and just get it done is huge for where this team is at and where they hope to go the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they really are trending into into an upwards possibility because of the fact of the offense will get better as years to come because of the fact of you got Kaprizov on the helm. And then, they've got to find, like every team, consistency and their identity. So I want your opinion on this because I've always said this every year when we come into the NHL season and when we're in the back half. We got 26 games left. January, February, and March. You got to have your identity set. And some teams, like I'll give you an example. So the Dallas Stars, defensive minded. That's their identity. And then you've got, the Colorado Avalanche, hyper aggressive scoring team. That's their identity. Are there some teams that stand out to you that kind of have found their identity? And are there some that might be struggling a bit to find themselves?
Yeah, I think you look at teams that are up near the top. I mean, the Seattle Kraken are a great example this year in the Western Conference of a team that took just huge leaps from what they did last year to this year. And they're a team that not only can really punish you physically, but they're a team that can score goals with the best of them. And so they really have that nice 1-2 combo of a team that can score when they need to, but a team that can just wear you down. And it's funny to see some of these teams like the Wild, for instance, last year, who had a pretty set identity, very much in the similar mindset to where the Seattle Kraken are now. They can score a ton of goals, but they also can wear you down and just try to kind of outlast you. The Wilds are more of a defensive and goaltending oriented team this year, with the offense trying to get itself figured out. And so it's interesting too, because you had this Wild team last year with all the goals that they scored, and then they get swept in the first round. And so in the offseason, the Wild try to fix some of those areas that let them down in the playoffs, goaltending, special teams. And so they're better in those areas this year. They don't score as much. So if they do get to the postseason, it feels weird to say, but it seems like a team that is better suited to win a postseason series than they were last year. Other teams that are still trying to kind of figure it out. I mean, the Calgary Flames are a great example of a team that was so good last year that now is struggling for a wild card spot at this point in the season. And they made some big moves in the offseason. Nazem Kadri comes in. They look like a team that a few games in a row looks really good, and then they take a step back. And so that'd probably be the biggest example in the Western Conference of a team still trying to figure it out, is those Calgary Flames.
Yeah, I think the Calgary Flames, and it's interesting you brought that up because, I mean, here they are. They move on from Johnny Gaudreau, who's now in Columbus, and they bring in, they trade away Matthew Tkachuk to go and get Jonathan Huberdeau. And the crazy thing is, this team, because the one big addition was Blake Coleman. That kid is fast. And I'm like, watching him with Tampa Bay, that's just unfair. Like they're just hyper speed, and they know how to score, and they're very smart at puck distribution. So bringing him on to Calgary, where they moved on from a lot of players, but they're trying to find that identity. I like the fact they brought in Jacob Markstrom, because I've said he's like an iron horse, man. Like, you put so many minutes on this dude, and watching him from Vancouver, he's working his tail off, and he's really trying to give you the important stops that you need. But he's human. He's not, he's not this Superman you always need. So that's where you got to have that. And it kind of leans a little into the topic. But to finish, I mean, I could tell you right now, Minnesota, even 2 years ago, when they played the Vegas Golden Knights, they were giving Vegas fits. And I loved that series because I was a little scared. Are they going to prevail, or are they going to lose to Minnesota at this point? Because that was a great matchup through and through. They showed physicality. They were the kind that, like, look, they'll sock you in the mouth. They'll let it be known. And then we're going to come at you offensively when we have that opportunity. So this leads to my next question, because like you mentioned, they're defensive centric and they're also big on goaltending. I've said this, that like in the NFL, this season, we had a ton of injuries. And it's like you could not go a season without a serviceable backup quarterback. I kind of pin this like the NHL. You can't stretch out a season unless you got the right serviceable goaltender. Like, what have you seen the trend of, just the NHL moving into that, that possibility? Because I'm watching goalie tandems, and it's like, you got to have it.
Yeah, we're seeing it really play out this year. And for the Wilds, not really knowing what to expect from Philip Gustafsson this year as a young goalie that really didn't have a ton of starts at the NHL level, you're taking a huge risk by trading away a guy in Cam Talbot who what you have with him.
Yep.
And Gustafson has been just nothing short of amazing this year. One of the top goalies in the NHL in pretty much every statistic there is. And so to have him to also pair with Marc-Andre Fleury has been big for this team, because what both of those guys have done consistently all season is they are able to be their best early in the game while this team tries to figure it out offensively. And so that combo has been huge. Without one or the other, this team is nowhere close to where they're at right now, which is in that second wild card spot. They're probably more towards Connor Bedard without both of those goalies than they would be to the postseason. But throughout the league, you see all these games in which your starter is not able to, like on the second night of a back-to-back, your starter's not able to go both games in a row typically. And so how good are you is usually defined by that backup. And we saw a lot of trades in the offseason for teams looking for quality backups. And I think it just, to your point, further underscores the need to have two guys that are capable of standing in at any given moment. Otherwise, you're probably not in a great spot.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, even if we're seeing young goaltenders like what the Golden Knights are going through with Logan Thompson and with Aiden Hill, both those guys, I will honestly say, if they do make the playoffs, they are going to be seriously battle tested because they haven't gotten to that point yet. But I, like everybody else, would be very excited because we watched Jordan Binnington come out and he was great. They won the cup in 2019. And then, several others that have come out of this position. But it is true, though. I mean, and it does serve a stability factor when you do that, because then you're looking at it, the goaltending, as long as it's stable, you can focus on offense. You can focus on defense. And the defense really does help a lot. There are teams that are solid on defense that they give those looks to the goaltender like, we got you. And then some, they're just struggling to really kind of stop the puck, even distributing it to getting it to the offense so that they can go and put pressure on the opposing net. So we know that the trade deadline is coming up on March 3rd. And I know the Wild are kind of looking on this where they're really kind of middle of the pack on this one. So how do you kind of see a little this trade deadline kind of coming up? And if they don't make moves, is there something that should be addressed come the offseason?
Yeah, this is a fascinating last few games before the deadline for the Wild, because I think Bill Guerin is still waiting for this team to prove him wrong as to if they should make a move or if they mostly stand pat. I think the biggest thing, and this is something that Michael Russo has keyed in on over the last few days, is that this team has a real big opportunity to be a broker for deals for other teams. We saw that in the Ryan O'Reilly trade, where they take on a portion of his cap hit this year. They get a draft pick back in return. The Wild have around $12 million in cap space for the deadline this year to do that same thing. And the logic being, if you're a bigger part of a trade where you facilitate, a good portion of a player's salary cap hit to allow them to go to another team, you're going to get a nice prospect or draft pick back in return. And so if they don't make any sort of moves, I know Brock Besser is the most heavily linked player to the Wild, but you look at his contract situation after this year, it's not super feasible for the Wild to take on money past this year without having to make a ton of really tough choices. So Bill Guerin's preference is to, if he does bring somebody in, have it be a player that's signed for this year only. So if they do that, the jury is kind of still out. If the Wild play well up till the deadline, we could maybe see Guerin make a move. But I think the more likely path is that this team makes a couple of lateral moves. Guys like Jordan Greenway, who has been rumored to be on the trade block for a while, maybe you move him to create a roster spot for one of the young guys they have in Iowa. I think that's the more likely path, with Guerin trying to use that cap space to pull in some additional assets too.
Yeah, and not to mention, too, like we mentioned with the Matt Dumba situation, there could be a point where they may not move him in the trade deadline. They might move him in the offseason, which that could be a smart thing to do, because They'll be 110% healthy. They would be guaranteed where if you get, draft and money compensation as well behind that'll give, Minnesota some flexibility to where they can bring in new defensive guys, or they can work through their farm system, get the next big thing. We're already seeing that with a lot of different teams. And it is interesting because it's so important, and we're seeing that where, draft capital, and even with as far as a cap stretch league it is, that it's so hard to invest in long-term contracts with players because of just the league situation. So, even if they bring somebody in, you're right. Somebody that's at least 1 year for this year that they could utilize, because we're seeing a lot of rentals this year. And it's very rare that if they find their guy, they say, we want him long-term, we're going to give him this long-term contract, he fits our culture. And hopefully, if the Wild, if they make that happen, and if they do find somebody that matches Minnesota's culture, that's somebody they can't afford to let go in the end. So, previewing the NHL playoffs, because there are going to be teams that's going to give you fits. There's going to be some teams that might be falling off a little on the cliff. But as far as, Minnesota's thing, because you mentioned a couple of teams that would be tough to get past. Colorado would be one. Seattle might be giving you some fits. If you're lucky enough, playing Vegas again, that might be one you might go to a toe-to-toe 7-round match on. Are there any others that you might find on the back of your mind that could be one that could be a little bit of a momentum changer for the Wild?
It's funny because the Winnipeg Jets have been one of those top teams in the Central Division all season.
Yep.
And yet the Wild have had good success against them this year, because I think it's a similar style that the Jets play to where the Wild are at. So you're not having to try to match teams offensively. They're much more comfortable in a slow it down type game.
Mm-hmm.
And Colorado is right on the heels of the Jets for one of those top 2 spots in the Central. And then the Wild are only 4 points back of the Jets themselves. So Winnipeg is on some shaky ground right now after having a real firm hold on that 2 spot in the division all season to this point. Beyond that, I think you maybe look at, as crazy as this sounds, if it gets to a later round, the Los Angeles Kings, all the goals that they've scored this year, they still give up a ton of goals. And it seems like they maybe have started to shore up their goalie situation a little bit. But that is a team I think I look at as potential to really get caught by a team that just gets hot offensively against them, to where then they can't stop the opponent, and maybe their offense is not able to match as well. It's going to be fascinating, these Western Conference playoffs, because all of these teams have been here for most of the season, and now you're starting to see teams like Colorado really put it together to where those teams that you'd expect are going to be there in the end, and they may be better suited to win than the teams that have been there all year.
That's true. And I've always said it, it's always, how do you approach the playoffs? Are you the kind that, you're on the magic month of momentum, or, if there's certain struggles and teams that find that early on before the playoffs start, those are the ones that are always momentum killers for them, because that's where they know your identity. They know you're a little shaken. And then that's where they're going to use that against you, to where now you're kind of first round exits from there. But this playoffs is going to be really interesting. I think the Western Conference, there's a lot of headliners. There's a lot of different stories. In the Eastern Conference, we kind of know what our top teams are, but it's still going to be quite the wild matchup itself, no pun intended, but it's still going to be one of those interesting playoffs that we'll ever see. And then hopefully come the next year, there'll be other teams that are going to be on the rise. Like I said, I think Buffalo's in a position they could be a team. If they don't make it, or they do, they've got some promising hopes with Tage Thompson, and then several others that are going to be on the fence lines looking inward. So great stuff. I appreciate you coming on, Seth. Where can everybody find you to talking about those Minnesota Wild?
You can follow me on Twitter personally at Seth TOUPS. Also, you can follow the show account at Locked On Wild. Available on all of your favorite podcast platforms, YouTube, all social media. So just follow along if you're curious as to how the Minnesota Wild are going to do the rest of the way. We've got you covered.
There you go, guys. Well, I appreciate your time, Seth. Have a great rest of the President's Day weekend. Have a great weekend. We will see what the NHL playoffs will shape like, and hopefully there'll be some more interesting moves come the trade deadline. Take care, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and isn't that interesting when you watch in the Western Conference, because it's a lot of headliners. Like, it could be wide open. It's very wide open from the look of it, because there's so many different stories that, I mean, the Golden Knights are on a 5-game win streak. The Wild are hanging on a thread. And, Colorado, they're always going to be that kind of team because they have that establishment. And they're talking about potentially going and getting Jonathan Toews. Like, they're still reloading. They're loading up every single one of these players that you find, on the trade deadline, on a lot of different, on a lot of different perspectives on it. So I think because of the way that things have really shaped up for this team and further and beyond, it really has become, it's so unimaginable, though, because of the fact that you're in a tough cap stretch in the NHL. So you're going to get a lot of rentals. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a break here. We've already gotten close to 3 hours on this show, but I've been excited about it. All right, folks. Well, first and foremost, like we said, we know that your next sporting event or your next concert or whatever it may be, prices are going up. Thanks a lot, inflation. But we know that SeatGeek's got you covered for affordable prices on your next event and finding your seat. Okay, SeatGeek's got a lot of different live events, concerts, sporting events, even so many different, arts or even orchestras. If you're into that sort of thing, they got you covered with some of the best seats in the house for every single one of your next trips to your next event. SeatGeek.com. When you do go to it, find your seat, and before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS. The link is right there below you on the corner. Snake Sports is the promo code. That is where you can get $20 off of your first purchase of your ticket. $20 off. That's a bargain deal. And many, many more affordable tickets that are selling out right now. So go to SeatGeek.com, find your seat. Promo code SNAKESPORTS. That is where you can get $20 off of your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, promo code SNAKESPORTS. That's SeatGeek.com, promo code SNAKESPORTS.
Never stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top. Yo, no, I ain't the type to give up. If I do something, man, I do it till I get what I want. I turn a business out of nothing into something I love. I got a poker face, but honestly, I'm not one to bluff. I flip a switch, never miss, man, I always stay up. Don't let them see you, bitch, always have a plan to stay tough. This life ahead of you ain't easy, it was built to be rough. But that's what makes a personality, is tragedy, bruh. So keep your head on your shoulders. Now we ain't out here moving rocks, we out here moving.
All right, folks. Like we said, don't lose your seat. 20% off of your next purchase of your next ticket when you go to SeatGeek.com. Promo code Snake Sports. That is where you get $20 off of your next purchase. Jake the Snake back here with you on the Snake Sports Talk Show. What a long, close to 3 hours that we already are on the show. So, so we've got news now that it's finally happening. So the buyout has happened with the Utah Jazz regarding Russell Westbrook, and he's going to the LA Clippers. I think it's a good move. I think it really is a good move for the Clippers. They needed at least more juice, but they also needed something that was going to, at the very least, really help out this offense. So we know Kawhi Leonard, he does not talk a whole lot. So he's not as vocal. Paul George, he'll be reunited with Russell Westbrook since the OKC days. And I think the team, they're in on it. And that was going to be one of those topics that that the LA Clippers knew that they were going to have with everybody in the locker room. It's like, listen, we're going to bring in Russell Westbrook. We know that, the team is kind of in that position where they are right now, to where they want to potentially be better, because we know John Wall is constantly hurt again. So I just think John Wall literally is like glass. And so it is official. Westbrook is staying in Los Angeles, and he plans to sign with the Clippers. We know that it'll be interesting to see how that works. Because there is a lot of just, different possibilities where, the Clippers, because looking at the division, I'm going to see this right now. So looking at the West, the Clippers are sitting fourth behind Denver, Memphis, and Sacramento. We know that the Lakers, they had changed a lot on their roster. They no longer have Westbrook. They don't have to be burdened to that contract. And then the other part is, too, they got no Kyrie. So they have D'Angelo Russell that they traded to get back to Los Angeles. And it's been years after all the mess that they had from a lot of their youngsters. So it'll be interesting watching the Lakers really kind of play and pan out, because I just don't know if they're really going to be that close to making the playoffs. I just don't know. But there's that part that the Lakers know they needed to get Westbrook out. He just doesn't work. The other part is you watch every single one of the teams in the West. Denver, Memphis. I think Memphis is a little bit, I think Memphis is a little more overrated. I think Sacramento is an interesting story. I don't know how long they could last. But I look at all the rest of the teams. Denver, the Clippers, the Suns, Dallas, and Golden State. So these teams that we know have playoff experiences, and those that have serious veterans on their sides. The Suns are going to be great. I haven't touched upon that subject yet, but Kevin Durant to Phoenix just feels like a match made in heaven for Monty Williams. And I think this will really change a lot of the culture for the Suns, because they needed to have somebody that'll be an X factor, who can give you buckets, who can give you minutes, and somebody, too, that's got the length. He's got the size. So Kevin Durant, I saw this coming with Brooklyn, where it was going to be a complete tire fire. So, Kevin Durant, before the season started, there were talks about him wanting out of Brooklyn. I don't blame him. It looked like an absolute tire fire waiting to explode. And so then the talks were gone. Then Kyrie's name starts coming up as trade talks. Dallas goes and gets their guy. Now, they need help defensively, because Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, they're offensive-centric players. They need the ball in their hands. They need to shoot the buckets that they need to, because there's stuff on the line. But defensively, not so great. And from what I'm being told from the offseason, there is a very high possibility that the Mavericks could pursue Anthony Davis in the offseason. And I think that works because at least you're going to get a big man. You're not going to expect a whole lot from Anthony Davis because you have Luka and because you have Kyrie. So, and Mark Cuban took a risk on getting, Kyrie Irving. I didn't think this was going to work because we all know how Kyrie Irving is as, in his personality and just his character trait. We know that. But if you're sticking to just basketball, he's a great player. He's somebody that really can shoot well, has really good drives whenever they're coming from behind, and they're also, he's get a lot of really good ball distribution. But he's also somebody that's got a really good step back shot to him. So this could work, and I think Dallas, if they really get a surplus on defense, which they should, I think Anthony Davis would be a really good candidate. But I think the Suns are going to be primed to really be that tough team in the West because Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul, and somebody made this point too, and I saw this on the internet, but they're like, super teams don't always win championships because a lot of us were thinking of the LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh years in Miami where they won 2. They could have potentially won 3, but they fell apart. Kawhi Leonard ended up stopping that dynasty. Then you watch a lot of other super teams. The Lakers had one. Gary Payton, Karl Malone, Shaq, and Kobe. Then they lost to Detroit. So not all the time, I will say this about the NBA, not all the time do stacked teams really win championships. Not all the time. Because there are times where super teams could eventually break up. You saw the Brooklyn Nets, they did. I mean, you saw what happened with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They broke up. Westbrook wanted more money, and he wanted more because of the fact that he's a ball hogger. Took a lot of the time. Kevin Durant wanted to be elsewhere. He goes and joins Golden State. And by the way, he won 2 championships with Golden State. That didn't last long, guys. Because after the loss and the injury to Toronto, Golden State took a step back. So not every super team in the NBA always wins championships. We know Golden State with Steph Curry and with Klay Thompson and with Draymond, those are the 3 key pieces that you would need. Now, I think this year, because of where they're panning out, come next year, they're going to have to start making some moves. Because it's not always that you're going to keep the same group of people. But Phoenix is on the rise. The Clippers we know. But here's the other thing, though, too. The Clippers will sometimes be the Clippers. They may go and get names, but sometimes would underperform in the playoffs. So it's a usual thing for some teams. But I'm looking at it right now. Phoenix looks really good as long as DeAndre Ayton, he plays superb defense, gives me rebounds, and Chris Paul with his ball distribution. I mean, you remember the time when the NBA literally blocked away that potential trade, Chris Paul to the Lakers? You know how rippling that was when that was a headliner? I mean, Adam Silver, the commission came in and was just like, nope, we're vetoing that opportunity. He's going to the Clippers. And then what happened to the Clippers then? They were Lob City, and then all of a sudden the general managing, they focused on the wrong player, which was Blake Griffin, when really you should have looked at Chris Paul. And that's what changed a lot about the Clippers. So the Clippers, even when they had a team, they didn't win a championship. Brooklyn put together Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. No championship. They barely played at all on the same floor. They barely played. So if you're watching Phoenix right now, I think they'll be better. I think Kevin Durant, this is not there's no stain to his career, because we all know when we were there with the change, when he went to Golden State, we were all like, what the hell? So, but I also knew why. So because he goes to Golden State, he's got a great chemistry. They go and win a championship. And then Kevin Durant's like, I want to do my own thing. I can understand it if Kevin Durant went to Golden State, won a championship, and then the next year went back to Oklahoma City and said, I've learned how to win a championship. I know what it takes to win a championship. Let's get it going. I can understand that. And by the way, LeBron James had the same deal. Moves away from Cleveland. He got his first finals appearance, lost to San Antonio, and then he goes to Miami, wins 2 championships. Then he kept his promise. A kid out of Akron, Ohio, goes back to Cleveland, wins a championship in the 2016 team. And by the way, Cleveland plans to buy out Kevin Love, which, what was Kevin Love's job? He was a serviceable big man, was really good when it came to points and rebounds. When I watched him in the days of Minnesota, I thought he was really tough. But I'm telling you, you're watching a lot of these teams right now. Boston doesn't miss a beat. I think after the incident with Ime Udoka, Joe Mazzulla, I thought is really good for this team. They kept the team as a whole. And again, I thought Kevin Durant would have been a perfect fit in Boston because Boston would have needed that next big man. You're clearly like Jason Tatum. We know this past weekend with the All-Star festivities, he won the MVP in the All-Star game. It doesn't change a thing about how we feel about Jason Tatum. Because I know how I feel about Jaylen Brown. I'm getting points and I'm getting defense. Marcus Smart, I'm getting minutes and I'm getting defense. Jason Tatum, you're going to try to get stardom, but he's nowhere close to it. He admits it himself. Not exactly, the stardom type, but he is somebody that's going to give you minutes and points. I think defensively he kind of shrinks, but I just look at all this lineup. It does not lie. I think the lineup itself really just shows exactly the true colors of a lot of teams. So, again, and I may ramble on with this for quite a while, but still, you look at a lot of those teams in the NBA. Like, I don't trust Memphis. There's times where I may not even trust Sacramento, but they're playing good. I give them props. They play really good. They got Domantas Sabonis, and De'Aaron Fox is playing real good. I give it to them. But as far as the playoff veteran teams like Phoenix, Golden State, the Clippers, and a couple others, those are the ones I'm probably going to end up trusting more. Now, in the Eastern Conference, there's only 3 teams, possibly 4 if we look at it. Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Cleveland. And by the way, Cleveland is on quite a tear. Like, they are on quite a tear. Donovan Mitchell is playing really, really good. I think this is a good thing for the Cavaliers moving forward. I think Cleveland really will find their spot. I think they really do play much better, and they play well. But this is a joke if you got Oklahoma City, Minnesota, New Orleans, Utah, and Portland above you if you're the Lakers. It's embarrassing. But this is why that, a lot of these teams, you just see the truths unfold right in front of your eyes. So I just look at it this way. And I think it'll be crazy to think that you just got to find a way. You really have to find a way. All right, by the way, some breaking news and reports. So after we saw a lot of coordinators get moved, oh boy, this is literally what I said from here. This is literally crazy. So the LA Chargers, who were terrible at defense for the last couple seasons, Ronaldo Hill is leaving the Chargers, and he's reuniting as with Vic Fangio, becoming the defensive pass game coordinator. So he's going to Miami. So that means now the Chargers really got to find a defensive coordinator. But look who all just was out there. That's insane. So, and now they're planning to promote Derek Ansley to be their new defensive coordinator and Tommy Donatel to be the pass game coordinator. So, Ronaldo Hill is gone. I don't know. I feel like this was kind of one of those curveballs that the Chargers now are really hitting, and they've already left, Vic Fangio, where he goes to Miami. That defense is going to be much better next year for the Dolphins. And then you've got a couple of really good defensive coordinators that they were already taken. Wow, this will be interesting. But they changed they literally changed everybody except for head coach. So they changed the quarterback's coach. They got a new offensive coordinator who I think is going to be really good in Kellen Moore. They changed now their defensive coordinator, and now they got a new pass game coordinator. Like you could tell what is happening on the interior, like the inside of the building from a lot of these teams. But wow. So Ronaldo Hill is going to Miami, reuniting with Vic Fangio. Now, by the way, Vic Fangio, he was there in Miami. He was there in Denver. So Ronaldo Hill was also part of that. But that's crazy. But you know what this is gonna mean, because this is now a lot on the line. The Chargers can't afford to underachieve for next year again. Like, they made it into the playoffs, but then got knocked out in the first round. Like, it was bad. If they had repeated the first half of the game to the second half, the Chargers would be great. But this is where now, Brandon Staley really has to get a hold of that defense. He has to get that defense to where it was even when he was a DC with the Rams. Like, you can't afford to miss out on that. You can't afford to end up making that happen. So, wow, what a change. That's interesting stuff. We get a lot of, different stuff. But thank God it even broke out in the news. But wow, interesting. But again, you missed out on a lot of guys. Brian Flores, he's the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. They'll be better. Miami, Vic Fangio, better defense next year. So you really have to pay attention to that narrative. So I don't know. I don't know what you do. But all I know is that's just been a ton of moves. So, all right. So on President's Day, we know that this is a day where we really look back at a lot of our former presidents. We obviously have the current one who's in office, but I keep this short and brief. But some really good President's Day kind of things, because everybody we all know during President's Day, they're either out there riding. Because I've done that a couple times where, we've gone out riding with the quad, gone out to, the dunes. We've gone out to a bunch of places. So I usually like to go riding during President's Day. Sometimes too. I mean, we chill, we hang out. Going to be planning to go to the gym afterwards. Me and my fiance, obviously we have our wedding that we're still, coordinating on and we're preparing for, which is exciting stuff. So there's a lot of stuff right around the corner. But President's Day, we literally look back at a couple of things from former presidents. And I think about this too. So, as far as our country and as far as our nation is shaped, like, presidents are a big thing. They are, because it's what shapes the structure of our nation. And now we know there's that relationship that they have tied to Congress. So I think about it this way. So as far as, as sports goes, like, I look at it from, a lot of different perspectives up on this. So I'm gonna try to, get some memorable stuff with, as far as, let me see here. So here's something that's pretty interesting. So there's some former presidents who actually have played in sports. So there's at least 11 of them. So here's a couple of them here. So one president, one as we always know, the honest man himself, Honest Abe Abraham Lincoln. After moving to Illinois as a young man, he developed an impressive reputation as an amateur wrestler. All right. I didn't even know that. So in the early 1830s, a saloon keeper bet the owner of a general store where Lincoln worked $10 that Lincoln couldn't beat Jack Armstrong, who was the champion of the nearby town. A match was arranged, and people came from miles around a town square to a town square near the store where they bet money, tobacco, drinks, and other items of value on the contest. As the two men grappled, the short, muscular Armstrong tried to get in close and overpower Lincoln, but Lincoln, who despite his weary build was renowned for his strength, held him off with his long arms. And then finally, Lincoln threw Armstrong and pinned his shoulders to the ground. Armstrong's friends, angry at the defeat, confronted Lincoln, who told them he would fight, wrestle, or race, or run a race against any of them. Armstrong finally diffused the tension by shaking Lincoln's hand and declaring him the winner fair and square. And the two men eventually became good friends. The tenacity and resolve that Lincoln developed through wrestling undoubtedly came in handy when he had to lead the Union in the Civil War. So how about that? Abraham Lincoln, a wrestler. I did not even think about that. Another one, Teddy Roosevelt. So after a sickly childhood, Teddy Roosevelt determinedly built up his body with vigorous exercise. As a college student, according to the 1957 Harvard Crimson article, Roosevelt began entering boxing tournaments where he made up his fierceness and ability to withstand punishment what he lacked in skill. Even after becoming president, Roosevelt engaged in sparring sessions with some of his White House aides and other opponents. He recalled that the White House Fight Club came to an end after he squared off with a young Army artillery captain who countered one of Roosevelt's punches and gave him a permanent eye injury. So that is pretty interesting, right? So Theodore Roosevelt, which we always know, the Rough Riders, I guess you could really say. I mean, anybody that reads up on the Rough Riders, they were very fierce. So that's interesting, and I don't think it was quite a coincidence. I think knowing Teddy Roosevelt and how fierce he was, especially during that tenure, that's an interesting thing. Franklin D. Roosevelt, as a prep school student, the physically slight young FDR had more success as a debater than a second-string member of the football team, and sometimes inflated his athletic resume with fictitious exploits as a boxer or distant runner. At Harvard, he rode for one of the school's crew clubs. But though he wasn't a great competitive athlete, Roosevelt would become known as a swimmer for a different reason. After being stricken with polio and losing his ability to walk at age 39, the future president realized that water could support his weakened body and began swimming 3 times a week in order to rebuild himself enough to resume his political career. It worked. Within a few months, his arms, stomach, and lower back had regained the strength that enabled him to hang on to a speaking podium and to move short distances with the help of a cane and the steadying arm of an aide. So after Roosevelt was elected president, the New York Daily News held a fundraising drive to build him a small 50-foot long pool inside the White House so that he could continue to get his exercise. Wow. That's interesting. I didn't even know that. So, after all that time with FDR. But here's the other thing too. FDR was another one of those presidents that really got the nation out of some serious turmoil, especially in World War II. So that's crazy. And then we got a couple, but here's one that I really do want to point out. So John F. Kennedy. So JFK played left end and tackle on the football team at Choate Hall, his prep school, and swam on the varsity team at Harvard. Slim and squared-shouldered, he might have been the president who looked the fittest, even though in reality he was plagued with health problems, including Addison's disease and often severe back pain. JFK's best sport may have been golf. He had a wonderfully lyric swing, Smith said. I remember talking to a golf pro who told me that if Kennedy had been healthy and had wanted to, he could have been a professional golfer. So kind of nice to relive a little bit of history on President's Day, right? So how about that? JFK as a golfer, I could see that potentially happening. I mean, you know what? If you're the president and you're going out for golf trips, and you're playing a lot of these different, a lot of these different holes and such, like, you get like at least a foursome there for everybody playing on the golf courses. Like, it's fun. So, wow. JFK is a golfer. FDR is a swimmer. Teddy Roosevelt is a boxer. And then, of course, Abraham Lincoln is a wrestler. How about that? Interesting stuff. All right. Well, like all good things, it's got to come to a close. So I appreciate everybody who has been on here hanging with me for 3 hours on the show on this 3-hour Snake Sports Talk Show, President's Day edition of the show. Shout out to all the interviews we had earlier. Dan Holmi, who joined us earlier, Locked On Capitals. Javier Reyes, Locked On Padres. Gil Martin, Locked On Islanders. And then, of course, Seth Toupal, who was on with us, Locked On the Minnesota Wild. We had a lot of really, really good interviews all throughout the span of the 3 hours. Appreciate every one of you guys for joining in and for hanging with me. And if you haven't done so already, like, subscribe, hit the bell button for all latest notifications to keep you up to date on future and past shows of the Snake Sports Talk Show. All of the links are in the description. +2, you need to find a seat and $20 off. Promo code Snake Sports for SeatGeek.com. Link is down in the corner. Have a great rest of the President's Day weekend, folks, and we'll see you next weekend on the next edition of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care.